today we're streaming away. I hope you're doing well. We're streaming away, we're streaming today. The world is going to hell. Come join me as we watch the show. The world falls in decline. I hope you're doing well today. I know I'm doing fine. 'Cause we're streaming, we're streaming, we're streaming today. That was a nice one, that one. I like that one. That was good. Sometimes I do the song and it's like clumsy and dumb and I fall all over the place. That was a nice one, though. That was a nice one. I hope you guys are all doing really well today. I'm having a pretty good day. Did an interview today with Joel Bergman, the editor of Fight Back magazine, and also helps run the website Marxist.ca. Really good interview. Really worth taking a look. We've got to be paying attention to who is actually doing the work on the left, who's actually organizing and getting things done. So definitely a resource worth paying attention to and an interview worth watching. So let's dump into today's news. As far as I'm concerned, as you can see, I've got a whole ton of tabs open here. So, Cuban foreign minister exposes the July 11th manufactured campaign, which was generated in Florida, not Cuba. Millions of people have been duped by an elaborate social media marketing ploy. An advanced and newer version of automated accounts, or bots, troll accounts, were deployed to take over Twitter and other social media platforms. They are said to be undetectable, and thus it's a very costly operation which serves to multiply trending tweets exponentially. Rodriguez, the Cuban foreign minister, a large number of complaints were immediately made by users denouncing the mass bot activity. Despite the denouncements, international media outlets reproduced false news reports based on the key messages these bot firms were contracted to amplify. Geolocation of U.S. originating tweets were altered to show as coming from Havana. The bot systems were able to tweet and retweet at high rates, 5 times per second, and spammed celebrities, artists, and athletes with messages of the SOS campaign, beginning before July 11th. The hashtag SOS plus Cuba hashtag appeared at 16 times the volume of hashtag Cuba on its own. And to further this, this picture here has been trending. Top Twitter trends for Richmond, United States. You can see the number one, Warriors, right? 35K tweets. The next one, Otani, 58K tweets. Texas Democrats at 85K. Mel Gibson is trending at number 4, 15K tweets. You look at Cuba, 3,900,066 tweets. A full, oh goodness, that's almost 10 times more than the number one trending amount. This is obviously a discrepancy. There's obviously bots in play. There's obviously this is obviously manufactured, and so the idea that all of the people who are calling for SOS Cuba are doing so legitimately, you can see fairly clearly that there is bot involvement in order to do as Mr. Noam Chomsky has always said to us, manufacture consent, which is exactly what is happening here. And of course, we are still talking for some reason about the billionaire space race. Jeff Bezos lost the billionaire space race to Richard Branson. His response is pure emotional intelligence, because this really mattered, right? It really mattered which one of these two billionaires was going to make it into space before the other one. That was very, very crucial. Please do not pay any attention to the Russian and Chinese space agreement where they are attempting to get a moon base on the moon by 2035. Pay no attention to that. Don't talk about that whatsoever. But be sure to really, really waste a whole lot of time and spend an awful lot of energy talking about which one of these absolutely worthless parasites who do no work, who offer no value, who are not valuable to the society, and are in fact a drain on the society. Please spend a ton of time figuring out which one of these two is going to make it to space, and then really care. Oh goodness, Jeff Bezos lost to Richard Branson. This matters. Oh my goodness. I don't understand why anyone gives a shit at all. Like, who cares? Like, who genuinely cares? So the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System came out with their semi-annual monetary policy report on Congress. The chair, Jerome H. Powell. Let's just jump down to the conclusion. We understand that our actions affects communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. The resumption of our Fed Listens initiative will further strengthen our ongoing efforts to learn from a broad range of groups how they are recovering from the economic hardships brought on by the pandemic. We at the Federal Reserve will do everything we can to support the recovery and foster progress towards our statutory goals of maximum employment and stable prices. Yeah, terrible times for the number 2 billionaire, and who cares? Yeah, he's still a billionaire, Ruth. He's still a billionaire. I mean, that's the thing. How you doing, Ruth? I'm glad you're here. Yeah, like, oh no, the number 2 billionaire is he's still a billionaire. Like, it hardly matters. Now, this is worth a little bit of deciphering, because this is coming from the Federal Reserve System, and as we know, the Federal Reserve, I mean, here it is outright stating that its goals are to of maximum employment. Now, this is a bit of a misnomer, because the capitalist system doesn't actually function if there is full employment, right? You'll notice that they're not saying full employment. They're saying maximum employment, because the capitalist system requires a certain degree, about 5% unemployment, in order to actually function. That if you actually had full employment, well, then workers could leverage their position, and you're going to create a labor shortage in the capitalist market. So capitalists, their system requires, in order to maintain the power of the capitalist class, their system requires a certain degree of homelessness and unemployment. It's built into the system that without it, the capitalists would quickly be unable to exploit the public, because the public would be able to leverage their position to increase wages, increase benefits, find better jobs. And as we know from Alan Greenspan talking about the former head of the Federal Reserve, he said in front of Congress that the goal of the Federal Reserve is to make people desperate, to make it so that the working class is scared and unable to find their footing, and that this is the backbone of the American capitalist economy. Yep, they don't mean what they say, so they just obfuscate. Yeah, well, like, they can't just outright say, like, quantitative easing was one of these, right? Like, they said quantitative easing is what they said, instead of a bailout, or what it actually is bribes, right? Like, it's just outright giving money to failed institutions so that they can continue failing. Like, that's what quantitative easing was. And of course, if you give quantitative easing to corporations, you call it something like quantitative easing. But if you give quantitative easing to unemployed people or people who are homeless, oh, then it's welfare, and you're a welfare bomb, right? Like, it's all they have. It's all they have is these semantic games, right? They legitimately cannot engage the populace on a one-to-one basis. They can't be honest about how the system works, because it's as Henry Ford said, it is better that the American people do not know how the economy works, for if they did, there would be revolution by the morning. He understood very clearly that the economy was rigged against the American people from the outset, that it in no way was it designed to actually benefit the populace. Henry Ford, of course, being a very astute and economist who understood how an economy actually works, because he paid high wages to his employees. And people questioned him at the time, saying, why are you paying high wages to your employees? You could pay less than this. And his response was very simple. If I don't pay them high wages, then no one will be able to afford to buy the vehicle. So there's a gentleman who understands how economics actually works. In modern capitalism, they have no contemplation of this. It doesn't exist in the way that they think. They genuinely believe that they can continue to suppress wages, make wages stagnate and even decline, while inflating the currency and inflating the economy, and somehow mystically and magically they'll be able to actually have an economy that functions. And of course, the Federal Reserve, the private institution that loans money to the American government, that's how it's structured. The Federal Reserve is not controlled by the government. In fact, the government is completely beholden to the Federal Reserve System, and that the Federal Reserve loans money to the government at interest, ensuring a permanent state of debt peonage by the populace, ensuring that the populace will always be in perpetual debt to a group of private bankers who do no work and provide no value whatsoever. Because we don't pay taxes for them to steal, pensioners also are no longer important since they no longer pay taxes. Responsible rebellion seems to be the only way. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was talking to Joel about this during our conversation today, that we need to be doing acts of rebellion. We need to be shutting down the 401. We need to be shutting down large-scale infrastructure projects. Like, we have no option. There's nothing left. And the Federal Reserve, their goal is to maximize employment, so maximize wage slavery, ensure that all the wage slaves are employed, right? Really spread wage slavery around as much as you can. And of course, they say maximum employment, but they don't talk about ensuring that those jobs are worth anything. They don't talk about ensuring that those wages are well done. And then, of course, what's their second point? Stable prices, right? Stable prices. So are they talking about prices in regards to, like, your rent or the food that you buy? No. When they're talking about stable prices, they're talking about wages remaining low. That they want wages to be stable. That when they're talking about stable prices, they are talking about wage slaves. That those are the prices that they care about, is ensuring that the wages of the workers remain low, so that the capitalists can continue inflicting themselves successfully on the populace without threat of being deposed of. Because as I always say, and I've become something of a broken record on this particular issue, capitalists provide no value. They are not worth anything. They don't help anybody. They barely even help themselves. Like, they're able to go get the nice house and the nice car and shoot a rocket into space and that kind of thing. But like, they're not really helping anybody. And when they're gone, no one will be like, oh, it's such a shame that they're gone. And so this is coming from the Federal Reserve, right? That they're not interested in improving the lives of their own citizenry. And as stated here, right, we are supporting the recovery through progressing towards our goals of maximum employment, keep the wage slaves busy, and stable prices, keep the wage slaves' wage low. That's what they're saying. So welcome to America. So, Jagmeet Singh has said the NDP would tackle Canada's deficit through taxing the ultra-rich. Of course, anytime this gets posted on social media, what follows is a bunch of conservative whinging about how ineffective it would be, except it's always been effective and it always works. And if they follow it up with, oh, well, the rich will just leave, to which the response is, great, goodbye. That would actually be a benefit to the society if the rich actually left. As if the rich could simply just, sell all their assets? Like, this is a net benefit. If the wealthy sold all their assets, who are they selling it to, right? Oh, they're selling it to regular Canadians, or Canadians who are going to stay, right? Like, there's this sort of, this childish, well, they should be scared, right? They should be scared looking at these polls, Ruth. Like, the idea that the Canadian populace was going to perpetually allow themselves to be bamboozled eternally while watching their society outright crumble around them. Like, that's just not going to happen. And I hope these capitalists are scared. I hope that they're scared, because it's becoming very obvious that, like, they're just detached sociopaths, that they refuse to actually understand their own system. They are illiterate. They literally do not understand why what they're doing is not working, right? And while simultaneously, like, the Federal Reserve is saying, yeah, we need wage slaves, and those wage slaves need to be cheap, right? Like, and even though they're saying it with this, like, decorum style language, like, it's becoming obvious that that's what's happening. And so it's leading to people just straight up not participating any longer, right? That you can only abuse people so much before they start abandoning you back, right? You can only abandon people so often before they just start saying, like, well, we've been bullied to this whole fucking system, fuck this, right? Which is exactly what they're facing. And you are starting to get this new generation, the Gen Z generation, like, these kids are going into universities and they are talking about this stuff the way that I am talking about it. Like, they're not being fooled. They're going into their economics courses and they're saying to their economics professors, so neoliberal capitalism is a fraud. That's what they're saying to their teachers. And if a teacher starts to try to teach neoliberal capitalism legitimately, kids are walking out. Like, they're literally standing up and walking out of the classroom en masse. And they're starting to say of these professors that they're frauds. Because they are. Because they are frauds. Like, if you are teaching neoliberal capitalism as if it is an actual economic system at this stage in the game, you're a fraud. Completely. And there's no argument anymore, right? Like, what leg does neoliberal capitalism have to stand on any longer? And these kids are seeing through it. And so when Jagmeet Singh says the NDP would tackle Canada's deficit through taxing the ultra-rich, and then these, like, old conservatives start whinging about it, we look at that and go, good, I'm glad that you're crying about it, because that means it's going to work, right? Like, if the conservatives are convinced that it will fail, then it definitely will work, because conservatives are illiterate or evil, right? Well, let the NDP go centrist and take the Lib spot. They also have to become Ruth. Such language. Well, like, at this stage in the game, like, something does have to give. And, like, the Overton window has shifted so far to the right that, like, we've become so accustomed to these neoliberal fascists that when somebody stands up and says something rational, like forget about like left, right, any of that. Like when somebody stands up and says something reasonable, like, hey, it makes sense that if the country has a deficit that it needs to pay down, that the people that would be responsible for that are A, the primary beneficiaries in the society, and B, the people who are hoarding mass sums of wealth, right? That's logical. Like that's not even I don't think that's even a political position. Like that's strictly an economic position. Like, yeah, you have worthless capital sitting around doing absolutely nothing, refusing to be mobilized, refusing to actually enter the wider economy. It's literally being hoarded, helping no one whatsoever, and you're having, and because of the political cowardice that exists amongst the liberals and the conservatives, they're refusing to actually confront this reality, the way that they're refusing to confront the reality of climate change, the way that they're refusing to confront the reality of the collapsing United States empire, right? And simply by stating obvious things that are true in very black and white kind of ways, oh, suddenly you're a far leftist radical, right? Like, it's really, really insane. Yeah. Well, we'll see, Ruth. I mean, the NDP could follow through. It would be very easy to follow through. Like, this is the thing that people pretend like this would be a very difficult, long, extracted process, and it really wouldn't be. The only thing that's holding it up at this stage in the game is the populace. That the populace has been gullible for so long. And they're starting to kind of wake up, and they're starting to figure it out. You can see that that's the case with the upswell of support for the NDP, especially amongst the youth. I think the most likely scenario is that the NDP scare these guys enough so that they actually start doing stuff, right? That's historically what's happened. Here's a great quote that I found from Malcolm X. This comes out of Jen Zedong. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful than the conservative. The liberal is more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship, allegiance, and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or tool in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberal and the white conservative. Malcolm X. Yeah, that's very akin to what I've been saying about the Liberal Party. I of course, say it based on issues of class rather than issues of race, which is what Malcolm X spent his life focusing on for obvious reasons. But this argument works just as well for poor white people who are in poverty, that if you can trick them into believing that you're actually going to work for them, and you can get them to vote for you, then you can do what you like. It would be easy, but they're different in the way they make money and get donors. Yeah, I mean, it really does just simply come down to whether or not the populace is going to engage politically, right? Like, and I don't mean go to the ballot box and vote. I mean, if the populace is actually going to get involved in third-party, non-affiliated groups, places like Socialist Action, places like Marxist.ca, are people going to actually get involved in these third-party, non-affiliated political movements, and then use their alliances and their voting power to get into parties like the NDP and the Liberals and force them to the left, right? Is the populace actually going to do that? Or is the populace just going to continue bowing its head and then going and voting either conservative or liberal, right? Like, that's the real question. And if the populace continues subserviating itself to the liberal-conservative alliance, then, you know, we're essentially doomed, right? Like, we're just kind of marching towards the grave with our heads down, doing what we're told while we're doing it. Oh, here was a great, something really great I found. This comes out of Thoreau Red Crow. Yeah, there has to be a better way to get people involved and wanting something new. I think people are hungry for it, Ruth. I think people are hungry for it. It's just, it really does come down to like, people have got to do it. Like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? And there's no way to do it except to do it, and to show people like this can be done. You can do this. And I know lots and lots of people who I talk to them about politics and all of this, and they're interested. I'm like their politics guy to talk to. But when it comes time to actually like engage with the political system, they just can't. Like, they just won't. It's just not part of their ethos or part of who they are or part of what they want to do, right? And so. But when it comes time to vote, they'll vote NDP, right? They'll vote the left wing, all of that kind of thing. But when it comes time to actually like go to a rally or go to an NDP convention or go to any of this kind of stuff, they're just not going to do that. And it straight up is exactly like that. They're just not going to do that. And as long as we continue on that way, well, business owners do that. Your landlord does that. Right? Like all of the capitalists do that, right? They are engaging with the system in significant ways. And so the question really is, like, are people willing to show up or not? Macht, how you doing today, bud? Macht Deutschland vom Fascismus frei. Simple electoralism isn't enough. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, it is a tool. Like, it has to be used. We have to mobilize and we have to leverage that tool as best as we can. But I was talking with Joel Bergman today, and he was saying that it should be used mainly as a platform to speak from. That the true politics happens in the street. That shutting down infrastructure, shutting down highways, like, that's how you actually move forward. The fear is not the same as the rally in 1981 when they are truly frightened. I don't know which rally you're referring to, Ruth. 1981. Here in Canada? Okay. So this is a really great series of quotes that come out, or series of texts that come from a fellow Thoreau Red Crow. As someone who spent a decade in South Florida, let me explain the reality of this photo. All weekend, a Cuban exile contingent of right-wing gusanos have been gathered on Cale Oco Street in Miami's Little Havana to celebrate the death of Fidel Castro. However, the hatred was always mutual. As Fidel characterized the first 1960s waves of wealthy white parasitic former landowners who were part of the Batista dictatorship, he overthrew as gusanos, which means worms. Based on their reactionary politics, intransigent support for the blockade, and desire to team up with the CIA to carry out terrorist attacks all across post-revolutionary Cuba. Note, not all exiles fall into this category, especially more recent arrivals. The zenith of Gusano interference was the 1961 US-backed Bay of Pigs invasion, which Cuba's government defeated. And afterwards, Fidel pointed out the wealth of many of the 1,100 exile soldiers that his troops captured and later released back to the U.S. in exchange for baby formula. Within those 1,100 soldiers were 100 plantation owners, 67 landlords of apartment buildings, 35 factory owners, 112 businessmen, 179 living off inheritances, and 194 ex-soldiers of Batista. Over the decades since that time, the aging Gusana contingent of South Florida has proven to be perhaps the most corrupt group, on a per capita basis, in American politics, which is saying something. In their dying off ranks, you can find Batista's old BRAC secret police goons, ex-Cuban mafia, CIA contract killers, and former oligarch of vast latifundias. As essentially Miami is still controlled by the remnants of Batista's dictatorship and their offspring, a regime which killed 2,000 Cubans and tortured tens of thousands more. Several prominent families form the centerpiece of this group. The Ninoscas, the Diaz-Balarts, Patriarch Raphael was a minister in Batista's government. The Rose Latines, Ileana is a U.S. congresswoman. The Estefans, you probably know of singer Gloria, whose father was Batista's bodyguard. Ex-Florida Supreme Court Justice Raul, I don't know why I'm struggling with the word Raul Cantero III, grandson of Batista, and the Batista torturer Estevan Ventura Novo, who opened the largest security firm in South Florida. This gaggle of balding, pot-bellied geriatrics sipping caquitos who foam at the mouth every time they hear the name Castro also supports some of the most notorious assassins the U.S. government ever hired. Terrorists like Luis Posada Carriles, known as South America's bin Laden, who blew up Cuban Flight 455 in 1976, Orlando Bosch, his now deceased partner in crime who financed attacks of Havana hotel lobbies, Felix Rodriguez, point man for Oliver North in the Iran-Contra scandal, trained Central American death squads, and relayed the execution order of Che Guevara, and the group Alpha 66, etc. In fact, if you go inside the iconic Versailles restaurant, where the media is gathered outside of their celebratory TV shots, many of these old hitmen have reserved seating. Lastly, nobody should ignore the degree to which the nostalgia of these bitter old right-wing gusanos is related to the issue of race. The Cuba they fled from, the 1950s, was much like the US at the time, segregated by class and race, which is why you see Trump-Pence signs amongst those celebrating Fidel's death, as their goal is also to make Cuba great again, by restoring their former privileges and the radical castes that come with capitalism. Increasingly, you'd never know by watching the US media that the majority of Cubans are people of color who support Fidel, since a disproportionate sample that arrived as early exiles were the relatives of the whites who left first and then continued to bring their extended family members ever since. But regardless of how much they celebrate Fidel's death, one thing is clear. Worms may dance on the corpses of lions, thinking they've won, but lions remain lions, and worms remain worms. Miami exile gusanos remembering the good old days. And if you're just listening, it's a picture of an old white woman with a thought bubble coming up of a white man whipping a black slave working in a plantation. This is a very interesting perspective that I'm not seeing circulated very often, pointing out what is fundamentally the truth, that the people who are calling for the destruction of Cuba are former slave owners. I don't really understand why we should be in support of that, but apparently we are. Yeah, I love this tweet. I've been seeing this around a lot. So, billionaires want us to forget that a father in the 1980s could spend 40 hours a week selling VCRs and own a home with 2 cars while going on a family vacation in a single income household. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, Ruth, are you talking about the separatist movement? Did anyone tell you you look a little like David Dole? Who is David Dole? How you doing, Drew? Glad you popped in. David Dole. A little bit like David Dole. Is this Paul? Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. He's the, what's his name? Oh my God, the Rational National. The Rational National. I do right now because I've got the beard trimmed this way and I've got the hair, right? And so we have like a very familiar look to one another at the moment. And you know what? I'll take it. This guy is a handsome devil. I'm more than happy that If this is how people want to see me, fantastic. Oh yes, he does very good work. He is. We're on the same sort of trajectory. He's a bit more soft-spoken than I am. I'm a bit more of an outspoken revolutionary. Hey Dan, how you doing today, bud? Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes, the Rational National does very excellent work. Excellent work. And of course, I'm jealous of him because he's got more subscribers than I do. But not for long, David Dole. You watch out. You watch out. Oh. Yes. Revealed the true extent of America's food monopolies and who pays the price. A handful of powerful companies control the majority market share of almost 80% of dozens of grocery items bought regularly by ordinary Americans. So, I mean, this is just, for instance, PepsiCo controls 88% of the dip market, as it owns 5 of the most popular brands, including Tostitos, Lay's, and Fritos. 93% of the sodas we drink are owned by just 3 companies. The same goes for 73% of the breakfast cereals we eat. They've even got, like, pasta, 78% market share, right? Like, our food is becoming, and they go through and they have, like, large single-serve yogurt and yogurt drinks. 96% of it is owned by a single company. For shoppers, it might seem like choices galore at the store, but most of your favorite brands are owned by a handful of food giants. I wonder if they'll use the... And of course, while they're doing this, they're spending millions of dollars on lobbying in order to bribe officials, right? You don't need to call it corruption if you call it lobbying, right? It's not, oh no, we don't have any corruption, we have lobbying. So this is a very, very thorough investigation. So, and going deeply into like what's the consumer price, what are farmers actually, how much farmers are actually selling it for. So you can see there's this enormous gap here. And simultaneously, oh, you'll see here they're showing a decline in how much they're paying the farmers, right? A steady decline in how much they're actually paying the farmers. Oh, but how much are they actually, what's the price for the consumer, right? Looks like it had a bit of a decline in the early 90s as they declined the amount they were willing to pay. So that makes sense, right? We'll pay you less, but that means it'll actually drop the price. But now they're not interested in any of that. The price has gone down, but the price that they're actually making you pay has stagnated for the last 20 years, it looks like. And this is classic capitalism, right? Classic capitalism. If they could pay these farmers nothing, they would. They would. Farmers received $424 billion in subsidies, of which 49% were just for 3 crops: corn, wheat, and soybeans. So we're subsidizing the farmers, right? And why are we subsidizing the farmer? Because the capitalists don't pay, right? Because the capitalists have wedged themselves in between the field and the face, the food in the field and to the table. The capitalists have wedged themselves in there and have proven to be completely worthless. That these services could be nationalized, that we could continue dropping the price, that if we're going to subsidize the farmer, then why don't we subsidize the distribution, and why don't we nationalize it and get rid of the whole process? Pay the farmer, right? Pay for the distribution, make the price as low as you possibly can to ensure that the populace isn't getting gouged the way it currently is, and get rid of it. The 14th of June was the day of the storming of the Bastille during the French Revolution and the Enlightenment, a national holiday in France. Well, thanks for sharing, Mock. Is this in relation to something, or are you just in a trivia mood today? Yeah, food industry workers, low pay, high hazards. This is a very, very comprehensive and thorough I'm definitely bookmarking this one. Definitely bookmarking this one. There's a lot of really, really good. Like, here's a great graph here. Human sewage produced in the New York metro area in 2017. So 27 billion pounds. Here's it represented in graph form. Animal waste produced in factory farms in 2017, 884 billion pounds. That's over 10 times, over 20 times. What? That's like over 40 times the amount of animal waste produced when compared to humans. Like this can only be described as a massive crisis. There's no other way and of course they're going into incentivizing farmers to grow the same crops has reduced the productivity of some of the country's most fertile lands, as monocropping depletes soils of nutrients. This practice requires synthetic fertilizers to compensate for the lost nutrients and pesticides to combat fungi as insect predators that thrive in these conditions. What can be done? In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon's agriculture secretary told farmers to get big or get out. But the problem is that the current system runs deep. This is a bit of the problem, that I've listened to interviews given by people who are saying there are alternatives, right? The concluding paragraph here is it's time to support small-scale regenerative farmers, regional food hubs and grocery co-ops, according to Starbuck. Alternatives already exist. We just need to boost public funding and resources to help sustainable, affordable, more equitable food systems take root. There was one fellow who was actually quite forgiving of the factory farm system and was saying, like, we were moving forward on a theory or an idea of how to organize this, and we realized that it's a mistake, it's an error, that we need to rethink how we are doing this, and that there are alternatives and that there are ways to move forward. But the number one problem that we have is that all of the infrastructure exists, that we already have a lot of infrastructure already built in farming, and we're being told now that we need to fund a project in order to dismantle a lot of that infrastructure and replace it. That's going to require a large push in public funding, which, if we've noticed recently coming out of the Americans, they are completely unwilling to do, because that would require confronting capital, as always. And that's essentially what this article is about. And again, it flows into what I've been saying for years now. The problems that the capitalists are generating for us are going to become more and more obvious. And an article like this goes a long way to showing how obvious these problems are and who is at the heart of these problems. And it is, fundamentally, once again, the capitalists. Hope you guys are doing well out there, man. Hope you guys are doing well out there. I love this Beaverton article. Mobile data in Canada is so expensive we can't, in good conscience, ask you to read this article on your phone. I wonder if they actually use the graph that... No. There was a graph that was circulating recently that I worry that I've gotten rid of, and I'd have to dig around for it. But it shows that Canada is spending way more than everyone else by huge margins. Huge margins. We're paying way more than anybody else while simultaneously getting amongst the worst service. So we're getting enormously bad service while simultaneously paying by far the most. And it's 100% because we've allowed these neoliberal capitalists to take control of the system. That we should, if we were smart, we should nationalize. And we should just simply tell these capitalists to get lost. But we're not going to do that anytime soon. Because that would require, being intelligent. Once again, the octoberstrike.com, I'm seeing this more and more circulating around. So, attention. There will be a general strike in the United States beginning October 15th, 2021. $20 minimum wage, 12 weeks paid maternity leave, health care, 4-day work week, environmental regulation, 25% corporate tax, spread the fucking word. And I look at this and I think this is extremely reasonable. Like this is actually beyond extremely reasonable. Like this is it in my view, this is the bare minimum. Like again, it flows into like, why are we begging for scraps? Why are we begging for scraps from these capitalists? Like, I don't understand why we're constantly begging for scraps. Like, the capitalists are not worth anything. They are worthless. We should be saying, let's get rid of these capitalists. Like, these should simply be the promises that the workers will immediately enact once they rid themselves of the capitalists, right? Like, that's how we should be talking, because that's how you scare the shit out of these capitalists. That you raise the stakes to the point where you are saying credibly, you could just not be part of this. You could be gone, right? Your free money system, your system that generates free money for you while you do absolutely nothing of benefit, could just go away, and you'd have to go get a job like the rest of us, right? That's the way you threaten capitalists. You don't threaten them with these like little piecemeal reforms, little like, please, Mr. Capitalist, sir, please, can we have a $20 minimum wage, please? No. You tell them this is what's going to happen, and if it doesn't happen, then you can go away, right? And they can. Hey, Wigwith, how you doing? Did you see Bernie's $3.5 trillion bill? Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. That even that the list, even not that it will pass easily or soon, that's not going to pass. Like, it's not. Like, that's really good for Bernie and really good for Bernie's brand, and also well within, like, he is the head of the Budgetary Commission, which is actually like a very important position, and so of course he's going to come out with some kind of bill like this, and it's really good for brand Bernie, right? And it's really good for what he wants to achieve as a politician, and let's be like as nice to Bernie as we possibly can. He probably believes in it, right? He probably is like, this is what we should be doing, right? None of that's going to happen. Like, this is the thing that people really need to start realizing. Like, none of that's going to happen. Like, there's so much that could have already been done, and they're not going to do it. They're going to find a way to not do it, and they're going to find a way to kill these bills. They're going to find a way to break them apart. They're going to find a way to siphon that any money that they give away is not going to be actually go into it's not actually going to go into the coffers of the people. Like, none of that's going to happen. Like, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise. Like, I'm glad that Bernie has done this so that we can see it happen once again in real time, right? Like, but let's not fool ourselves, right? It's not like Biden is suddenly going to be like, oh, good, we've got a $3.5 trillion plan to help Americans, and that's actually going to happen, and we're passing it. Here we go, stamp, off we go to the races. That's not happening, right? Wall Street needs to take out its big bite. The Federal Reserve needs to take out its big bite. Chase Manhattan needs its big bite, right? The hedge funds, all those guys, they need their big bite. And they don't give a fuck about you at all. Like, they don't care about the citizens at all. Like, take a look at what happened over COVID, right? The opinion of the powerful and the opinions of the ruling class was keep working or die, right? And keep working and die, right? They didn't give a fuck about these people when there was a life-threatening pandemic sweeping through. What makes you think that they're going to give a fuck about this $3.5 trillion bill? Yeah, I like this idea of this strike by just nitpicking 25% corporate taxes less than it was before Trump. Exactly. Like, why are we begging? Why are we begging? Mark, you're like, please, Mr. Rockefeller, sir, please a dime of your 400 billion USD accounting for inflation. Yeah, exactly. Like, no, we should be beginning at, we could take all your money away and ensure that you no longer have control of the means of production. And when they whinge at us and tell us, oh, these are the consequences, we just say, great, we accept those consequences. Anything to be rid of you, right? Oh, I'll just leave. Good. Bye. great. Please leave. In fact, that would be the goal. We will happily let you leave. Can I pack your bags for you? Right? Like, call these bluffs. Like, capitalists have no leverage. The only leverage they have is the money that they've stolen. That's it. But if the populace actually comes together and calls these capitalists bluff and says, oh, you guys are sociopathic nightmares, we can just get rid of you, right? And if we come together and actually vote along those lines and actually stand in solidarity along the lines of capitalists are worthless, because they factually are, right? They're completely worthless. They provide no value. And if we say to the capitalists, this is what you'll give us, and if you don't, then we'll just get rid of you, right? Like this list here, this should be the bare minimum. Like, and I mean bare minimum. Like this is what the workers should give themselves after they throw the capitalists away. Hey, Milius, how you doing? I don't know if I've ever seen you in here, bud. Milius Genghis Khan. That's a very powerful name. Good to see you. Yep, look up the 1944 DNC. Henry Wallace said the same things Bernie did. Yes, exactly. End the endless war. Universal health care, workers' rights. Henry Wallace was the most popular politician at the time with over 60% of the vote. They installed Truman instead. Exactly. Well, and there was a lot of things that happened because that was after FDR. Like, they put in the two, like, people in America are so heavily propagandized that they actually believe that the two-term presidency was put in to, like, keep things more democratic, when the truth of it is that they put in a two-term presidency because to prevent another FDR, to prevent somebody like FDR actually coming into power, helping people, right? Even though FDR was doing it in order to protect capital, he wasn't doing it to help people, he was doing it to protect capital, ultimately, because he knew that revolution was stirring. Like, he saw the revolution happen in Russia. He understood that the workers could just revolt against the state and eliminate the capitalists the way that they should have done. And so he did what any good liberal does, which is concede power to the degree he had to, while maintaining the system of capital itself, which FDR said outright was his great achievement. He didn't say that helping people was his great achievement. He didn't say improving the lot of the working class was his great achievement. He said his great achievement was saving capitalism. And then, exactly as Genghis Khan is saying here, that that Henry Wallace was running a very popular campaign, but it very similar to the way Hillary Clinton and also Joe Biden basically just, they're corporate insiders that they finagled their way in and seized power, snatched it from the more popular politician. Right? And this, of course, leads to the absolute catastrophe of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That Truman, against the advice of his own generals, dropped nuclear bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in order to flex his muscle, basically, to show the power of the United States and to scare the Russians. Really was what Truman's logic was there. And then, of course, in public, he was telling people, oh, we had to do it to prevent further death. Like, it's such a fucking bullshit argument. You want to actually prevent, like, the Japanese were literally, like, driving planes kamikaze style into the side of boats. Like, the war was over, dude. The war was over. Like, they were negotiating peace. They were negotiating an end to the conflict. And literally the only reason the Americans dropped it, like, and I used to think, like, no, the Americans were doing it to, like, and, like, no, the war was over. The war was over. They did it simply because, I mean, they're so racist they don't give a shit. Like, oh no, you nuked some Japs, who gives a shit? But also to, like, show the Russians who's boss, right? Because Americans, especially neoliberal capitalist Americans, are sociopaths, right? They don't give a fuck about human life. They care about being seen as terrifying warlords. FDR probably would have done the same. The Manhattan Project began in 1939, and much of the research was based on the Nazi atom project. They brought in a lot of Nazi researchers, and a lot of Nazi people went into the Manhattan Project, and also NASA, because they have the same objectives as the American Empire does, which is the subjugation and domination of the planet. People forget Biden and Kamala got so few delegates during the primary they had to drop out. Yeah, and as a kid in school, I thought there must have been another way. Yeah, of course there was another way, right? Just not do it. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Like, it's very simple. Just negotiate the peace with the Japanese. Negotiate, and like the real sadness, in my view, of the end of World War II and this period was that the Americans and the Russians really could have like looked at one another, nodded at one another with respect, and moved forward with sort of a peaceable agreement. That they could have really become partners, right? They could have really become friends and allies on the world stage, and really helped one another to build a more peaceful world. Like, they could have done that. But instead of that, they used Russia as a scapegoat to deal with the domestic problem that the capitalists were facing, which is that the socialists and communists were actually well organized and were causing them problems domestically. So they scapegoated Russia, created a McCarthyian anti-communist society, blacklisted a whole bunch of these communists and socialists, made their lives hard, destroyed socialist and communist publications, literally, if you were a communist, you couldn't find work in America through that period of time. And it was done through the scapegoating of Russia, which, near as I can tell, during that period was just kind of happily building its own society and, exploring space and shit, right? Like, that's what NASA and Russia tried to do with space exploration. Well, we have a Space Force now. Well, and the Space Force, this is classic Americanism, right? Like, the Chinese and the Russians have created an alliance with one another in order to get a base on the moon. They are thinking that they can have an active moon base by 2035, right? And so here's a very clear example of communists, coming together. And I mean, Putin himself is the society is neoliberal capitalism, but Putin is former KGB, and they have a history of communism that still is interesting and popular in Russia. Anyway, that's a very complex and interesting story unto itself. But so while the communists are building, right, and creating projects, well, what are the Americans going to do, right? The Americans are going to sabotage it, because the Americans are terrorists, right? And that's not my estimation, by the way. The Hague, the organization that was responsible for putting the Nazis on trial at the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II, the Hague has called the United States a terrorist organization. Because they are. They're so outside of international norms. They're so outside of what the rest of the world community wants to do. And they've shown over and over and over again their willingness to absolutely destroy nations and honestly, in some cases, it's for the pettiest possible reasons. The destruction of Vietnam and Cambodia should be seen as one of the most disgusting acts maybe in the history of humankind, because Vietnam and Cambodia are helpless. They're completely helpless. They have no navy, they have no air force, they have no real military force, and the Americans dropped bombs on them until they grounded their bombers because there was no other targets left to bomb. That's an atrocity that is beyond the pale. And it was done. Why was it done? To stop the spread of communism. That was the stated reason. It wasn't even to steal their resources. It wasn't even to enslave the population. It wasn't even to do any of the kind of classic stuff. It literally was done for petty political purposes in order to staunch the spread of communism. Like, that's psychotic. That's fucking psychotic. Literally political genocide on a scale that should have seen all of the people who enacted it and who voted for it imprisoned. But America doesn't really have any laws. They certainly don't enforce them. So this is where we're at. And you're going to see with the Space Force, right, that while the Russians and the Chinese are attempting to explore space and build moon bases and build space stations and things like this, the Americans will be lobbing shit at them, right? Just like throwing debris. Like, when you're in space, like, things are very fragile in space. And like, the Space Force is going to exist exclusively as a terrorist, barbaric organization in order to destroy any advancement of any other organization, right? And meanwhile, the United States themselves are not interested in building anything, building moon bases, building any of that kind of stuff. They're not interested in that at all. Like, the only reason they're building the Space Force is specifically to destroy any initiative put forward by the Chinese and the Russians. And that's it. That's it. They're not interested in anything else. Mock says FDR opened up trade with the USSR in 1935, recognized the USSR as a sovereign nation, Lend-Lease extended to the Comintern, had several conferences, such as the Yalta Conference with Stalin. Yeah, FDR and Stalin got on very well. And in fact, I actually think if Wallace had have gotten in instead of Truman, that Wallace was very sympathetic to the communist project, and I think Wallace, like, there is an alternative timeline where Wallace does make it, where Wallace gets through, and it'd be an interesting place, and worth pointing out, like, Truman was the president, I believe. Feel free to fact check me on this. Truman was the president that started the CIA. And he ultimately comes to regret that, because he sees that the CIA, at the end of his life, he sees that the CIA no longer is fulfilling its duty, that it's turned against the populace, that it's not working on behalf of America, that it is working on behalf of its own interests. And Russian history is fascinating, right? It's so blistering to me how often I speak to people who talk shit about Russia. And then I start asking them questions about, like, okay, what do you know about Russia? And it turns out they don't know anything at all. And it's like, you're literally shitting on a place you know nothing about. Like, not only have you never been there, you've never, like even opened a Wikipedia article about them, and you're afraid of them? Like, what are you? Like, and this has become my new talking point to capitalists. Like, what are you, a coward? Like, you're so desperately afraid of these people you know nothing about? That's cowardice. It's plain and simple. Yeah, I've talked to veterans, and they all basically say the same thing. We know why everyone hates America. We say we don't do those things when in reality, we do those things. Yeah, exactly. It was never about the war. It was about the CIA doing drug runs. Exactly. And to the point now where we've got former Nixon aides outright saying that the reason why they were doing the war on drugs was to destroy black people and communists, right? Hippies. That's the reason the war on drugs went on. And outright he says, did we know we were lying? Of course we did. Like, it's a full-scale admission that the entire war on drugs is a fraud. That it's not about protecting anybody. It's not about helping anybody. It's not about saving anybody from anything. That it was completely about destroying black communities and destroying communist and socialist movements. That's what it was about, and what it still is about. The CIA was created by the American National Security Act of 1947. You are correct. Thank you, Macht. Thank you. I can always rely on you for some fact checking, because I never want to be spreading misinformation. I always want to be rooted in reality. Oh, this is an absolutely brilliant. Like, again, I keep saying, like, things are going to get more and more obvious, right? Well, here are people making it obvious. The Great Prosperity, 1947 to 79. Pay rose with productivity, wages and overall compensation for production and non-supervisory workers, about 82% of private sector workforce in 2010, tracked steadily upwards alongside gains in productivity. The rising value of goods and services per worker meant rising pay, as we can see here. This relationship ended in the 1970s. The Great Regression, 1980 to now, and then it didn't. You can see, right? So this here is productivity, how productivity has risen. This is the best part. Anybody who says that workers are lazy is a fucking asshole. Like, literally, they are actively attempting to tell you that workers are lazy when we've never been more productive. That the workforce is more productive now with stagnating wages, with all of this shitty garbage going on, than it was during the period of time in the quote-unquote Great Prosperity. And then, of course, average hourly compensation has essentially plateaued, only going up about 18%. Average hourly wage only going up about 17%. So productivity has gone up 129%, while wages have only gone up about 18%. And then, of course, they go through taxation. Who pays taxes, right? You can see, take a look at the corporate shift. Corporations used to pay 35% of all taxes. Now it's 10%. Social insurance and retirements only spent 7% on taxes. Now they're spending 32%. So the shift of burden of taxation away from corporations onto social insurance and retirement programs. Excise taxes, of course, are down now 3%. Individuals are paying slightly more. And of course, here's the corporate taxes account for 35%. I already went through all of that. And they go through income inequality, right? Union membership. Wealth distribution is more unequal, right? In big ways. Analyzing CEO compensation. Debt increases even as two-income households became the norm. Debt as a percentage of disposable income has been piling up, right? Because that's how Americans have actually been paying their bills. That they're not being paid enough wages, they're not being paid enough, so they have to take on debt in order to stay afloat. And again, poverty has grown significantly, right? What is this? So the GDP has gone straight up on a 45-degree angle. Well, poverty, we're at 38% now. So a chart like this, which for the keeners in the crowd, I will gladly link to. You can see it. It's outright laid out here. Like, the system's not working, and I've never seen anybody come out with an argument like neoliberal capitalism doesn't work. It is a failure, and all they have left is stupid slogans and moronic PR. Wikipedia now too political. Yeah, it's run by the global intelligence state. Yeah, can't cite left independent journalists like the Gray Zone. Yep, that's absolutely all true. They work harder than anyone. The irony is the higher you climb the ladder, the more you get paid, the less you work. Exactly. Yeah, that's part of the reward, right? That the reward for climbing the ladder and being at the top is to work less. Yeah, oh, it's working for the predator class. Yeah, if you're a sociopath, you're doing very well right now. You're doing very well right now. Good moment to just say, please like, share, subscribe, do all the bells, do all the whistles. Consider donating $1 to the Patreon if you haven't, and if you are donating $1, maybe consider donating $2. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for being here. Brazil's Bolsonaro hospitalized in search for cause of chronic hiccups. So Brazil's Bolsonaro has been hiccuping for 10 days straight. Can you believe it? Imagine just sitting there going, right? And this can be a sign of other health concerns. That hiccups, especially ones that are and we know Bolsonaro doesn't really care about his health too much, given that he tested positive for COVID-19. He fully recovered from that, of course. And also I found out in 2018, Bolsonaro was seriously injured after being stabbed at a rally. Jeez Louise, this guy can't catch a break. Getting stabbed, now he's got a mean old case of the chronic hiccups. And I have come to see hiccups it's actually a thing with your diaphragm. And if I've got my chakra poster back here, so I know a little bit about the chakras. Right here is the power chakra. It deals with power imbalances. And if you have hiccups, it probably has to do with a power struggle that you're having, right? And looks like Bolsonaro is having a power struggle, given that he is polling very badly, and it's looking as though he is going to lose this next election, should the polls continue to reflect the way they are. So, bad luck to Bolsonaro. Let's hope that bad luck continues. Here's an interesting poll. So, Polling Canada, asking of the leaders, of the three leaders, they are interesting. 58% of respondents said that Singh was interesting. 53% said Trudeau was interesting. O'Toole, 36%. So only 36% of Canadians think O'Toole is interesting. Fascism is popular, it looks like. They have great ideas. Singh at 55%, Trudeau only at 45%, and O'Toole, again, 36%. So the same people who think O'Toole is interesting think that O'Toole has great ideas. Again, fascism is popular. And they get people like me. Singh at 52%, Trudeau at 42%, O'Toole at 33%. This is a really good indication that people, and it flows in with all of the data I've seen regarding Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh is popular, that he as a leader and as a person is popular. And if it was, if this election coming up was strictly a popularity contest between these three gentlemen, Jagmeet Singh would likely win, right? It is encouraging for the NDP. Now, that is not the only factor. The popularity of the leader is not the only factor. That people do care about who their local MP is. People do care about the likelihood of electability, right? That it's that old, well, I've got to vote Liberal or the Conservative will get in kind of riff. But the fact that Singh is popular amongst Canadians is a very good sign. It's a good place for the NDP to be at. And it also indicates, and this is, I mean, I'm very brutal about this, but I think we have to be brutal about this. It indicates that Canadians have gotten used to the turban, that the turban and the beard and the fact that he's brown and he's got this name Jagmeet Singh and he's Sikh. All of that really works against Jagmeet Singh. That old white racist fascists are never ever going to get on board with Singh simply because of his appearance, simply because of his religious worldview, and that kind of thing. But it seems as though what is happening is that the non-fascists among us, which is probably about 70% of the nation in my view, at bare minimum, are looking at Singh and saying, I don't understand why he feels the need to wear the turban. I don't understand his religion, but I respect that he feels that it's necessary and he's not backing down from his convictions. And that is very important. And I think that Canadians are coming away from saying, I don't get it, but I don't have to get it. And I actually really respect him for facing the pressure of the Canadians telling him, you can watch, there's a ton of videos. You can go find a ton of videos. People have made compilation videos of people walking up to Jagmeet Singh saying, you got to get rid of the turban, right? And Jagmeet Singh saying, I'm not going to get rid of the turban. It's who I am, and attempting to explain why the turban is important. But of course, Canadians don't care about that. They care about, about their own opinion. But Canadians have walked away from it, and they've gone, oh, okay. He took all of that pressure that we gave him, and he stood up for himself. He defended himself. He has convictions, and I respect that. That's the sign of a good leader, that he believes in his convictions. And so I think people are walking away from his appearance, which always was a major concern, and they're walking away from it respecting him more for staying true to himself. So very encouraging signs for the NDP. If I was a betting man, if somebody forced me to actually bet on the outcome of this next election, I think we're looking at a Liberal minority. And let's be honest, still probably the Conservatives in opposition. I would like to see the NDP as leaders of the opposition. I think that would be a good place for Canadians to land right now. But the right has not fully collapsed yet. And so we need to keep that narrative of I gotta vote Liberal or else the Conservatives will win is still going to be present. And until that narrative goes away, I don't think the NDP have a legitimate shot at striking for power. So I'm thinking Liberal minority, hopefully an NDP leaders of the opposition. We'll see. London is flooded. Tubes and trains stopped. Flood of the century, they claim. No kidding. London flood. Flash floods. Part of London receive a month of rain in one day. What the hell? A month of rain. Incredible. These kinds of events are going to become more and more common, These kinds of things are going to keep... Oh, and the sewage overflow. Ugh, gross. As climate change moves forward and as as things begin to keep going, these sorts of events are going to become more and more common. Hi, Jeff. How you doing today? Good to see you. I have to reset the internet. Be back as soon as possible. Oh, that's great, Mock. Yeah, it's so nice that you feel the need to even tell me that. That's so sweet of you. Jeff says, Dundas will be no more in Toronto. Streets and buildings to be renamed. That's an incremental change. An incremental change. But change is good. Change is good, and these sorts of changes do need to be happening, right? Like, we need to be acknowledging our settler colonial past, and we need to find a way to find reconciliation with this and to tell the truth about it. Like, this is the big thing, is that we're not telling the truth about it, and there's large segments of the populace who are still in denial about the importance of the residential school system, the importance of our settler colonial history, right? And so many of these guys are still saying things like, oh, it was in the past, like it was so long ago. Like, okay, then why are our streets still named after these guys? Why are there still statues of like these genocidal maniacs? Like, if I went to Germany and I saw a statue of Adolf Hitler, I would be very concerned. So I don't see any real difference between that. Wigwith is saying the problem is the Cons didn't lose much ground in their base to lose too many seats to the NDP, so it will mostly be Liberals and NDP battling, and Liberals always win that one. I think I see this as a little bit different than you do, Wigwith, because the Conservatives are losing people from their base because in their desperation to try and gain ground, they are beginning to appeal to the most fascist and radical elements of the society, and they're beginning to do it in ways that are obvious, right? It's very obvious that the Conservative Party is a fascist party. Like, it's very, very obvious. They're walking around saying Canada first. They're walking around espousing incredible conspiracy theories, literally saying of Justin Trudeau that Justin Trudeau is covering up a Chinese bioweapons program, like literally saying these things. That it's become completely like they've had to oust members from their party, like Derek Sloan, because he was being too overt in his fascist rhetoric, which far-right fascist groups like Canada First, which is a far-right fascist group here in Canada, have adopted in their Discord service. They call place the Sloan Zone, right? And the idea that the Conservatives are not still working closely with Derek Sloan, of course they are. Of course they are. You know, he's a vote for them, and of course he's just a sacrificial lamb so that they can maintain plausible deniability. But the reality is the Conservative Party of Canada is a fascist party, and they should be discussed as such. And people are beginning to see it. Even like normies, people who don't really pay attention to politics, are really beginning to see, like, oh, these guys are fucking fascists. Like they're like really doing some crazy, scary shit. Like, and the way they're talking is scary. And so people are leaving the Conservative Party, but where are they going, right? So they're going to the Liberals, right? Because the Liberals are essentially conservative. That the difference between the Harper Conservatives and the Trudeau Liberals is very slight. And I would actually argue that the Harper Conservatives were more to the left than the Trudeau Liberals. That the Trudeau Liberals are actually further to the right than the Harper Conservatives. And so there's a lot of people in the Conservative Party, especially after the vote denying the existence of climate change. You got to remember, 50% of the party, 48% of the party, 49% of the party, voted in favor of that. They said, yes, climate change is real, yes. And then the party said no. And like, can you still like hold your nose and vote Conservative under those circumstances? So lots of people are turning Liberal, and the same kind of siphoning is happening Liberal to NDP. That the support in the Liberal Party is actually quite soft, that people are realizing that the Liberals are actually quite conservative, that they're not really a left party. They're further to the right than Stephen Harper. And so lots of their membership is siphoning off into the NDP. And so it's like this siphoning back to the left, right? That the Overton window has shifted so far to the right that now the populace is starting to shift it back to the left. And the end result of this is the collapse of the Conservative Party again. The last time it collapsed was under Mulroney. Well, technically Kim Campbell, but it was because of Mulroney. And they collapsed down to literally 2 seats in the House. It took them 20 years to rebuild. It was Stephen Harper who became the Prime Minister. He was the crest of that rebuilding. And now the party is going to collapse again because it's out of ideas. It's out of ideas. It has no credibility. There's nothing left. And so it's likely to me that we are going to see an upswell of leftist ideas and thought as the right collapses. Because the last time the right collapsed, the NDP was not in a position to take advantage. right? That the NDP was like not really present. So the Liberals kind of just enjoyed a rule unopposed for a long time. But now the NDP is actually an established political party. Maybe the Queen will care. Yeah, I doubt it. I doubt it. They cart her out for speeches every so often. I don't think she's very aware of what's actually happening. She just looks into the camera and says her lines like so. We are all struggling together as British people underneath the rule of the Queen. Where's my pudding? Where's my pudding? I shouldn't rag on the Queen too much. The Queen is actually the reason we know as much about the 2008 financial crash as we do. Because when it occurred and it took down the world economy, the Queen insisted of her own economists and her own people that they create a one-page document, no larger than a single-page document, to summarize what the hell happened so that she could understand it. And they did. And so we actually do have the Queen to thank for why we know as much about the 2008 financial collapse. Because the American capitalists would have totally bullshitted us. They would have completely created and obfuscated a false narrative. Absolutely. But the Queen of England refused it. She was like, no, we need to know what happened. So I shouldn't rag on her too badly. Yeah, Wigwith, I don't know how they can do well when nobody likes their leaders. Hey DJ, how you doing? Hey, I seen a post in the Poof ODSP. Yeah, I got a hold of her. I got a hold of her. Or rather, she got a hold of me, and we've connected again. Thank you though for looking out, and this is a great opportunity to say Saturday, 11 o'clock, Yonge and Dundas Square. Come on down. There's going to be a protest. We're going to block the street because it is embarrassing what we are doing to our disabled. It is absolutely a complete and total embarrassment what we are doing to our disabled. That we are forcing our disabled to scream in the streets about the abandonment that they are experiencing. We give less money to the disabled than the United States does. We give 3 times less to the disabled than the European nations do. We are abandoning the disabled. We are abandoning our most vulnerable. It is a national embarrassment. We should be embarrassed by it. But of course, neoliberal capitalists cannot feel embarrassment because they are sociopaths. So it's up to us to actually fight back and make these guys scared of us. Yeah, man, just trying to pass it. Yeah, perfect, DJ. Thanks for looking out for people, man. I really appreciate it. I really do. Like, looking out for one another. That's how we get stuff done. That's how we get stuff done. Yeah, I'm hopeful the polls will swing left, and there really needs to be accountability for Doug Ford and Jason Kenney during this pandemic, and O'Toole. Today I heard a tweet from Robert Fife. Harper is meeting with Alberta's caucus calling for unity behind Kennedy. Behind Harper. Yeah, like, that makes sense. Like, Harper is part of the neoliberal capitalist structure. Harper is such an interesting figure, though, because, like, he enacted the child care benefit. This is something that nobody really knows about Stephen Harper and that he doesn't really tout. And I think that that's probably because of his Christian upbringing, that, you know, you don't tout your, you don't brag about your successes. And Harper, now that he is out of office, is actually a far more interesting figure. He's a far more interesting figure now, because now he can kind of just talk and give his opinion, and he doesn't really have much to worry about. And he doesn't have to worry about his image, and he doesn't have to worry about any of that. So he can just, like, come out and tell it how he thinks. And he's so much more interesting now that we've had these Trudeau liberals in who have run the country further to the right than he did. Like, people really go after Harper for being like, oh, he's just a neoliberal capitalist and he's Austerian and all this kind of stuff. Well, sure. Have the Trudeau liberals been better? What have the Trudeau Liberals actually done? Like, what's the legacy? What's the legacy of the Trudeau Liberals? Like, really, look at it. Tell me, what's the legacy? Buying pipelines? Harper administration never bought any pipelines, right? Like, what's the legacy? I can look at the Harper administration and say, okay, well, the legacy of the Harper administration is that when we went in, when Harper got into office, we had one trade agreement with the United States. Harper was saying that the United States is going down, right? He was very prescient in that regard, that he understood that the United States was going to decline. And so when he got into office, he immediately set on creating a whole bunch of trade agreements, right? That's what his whole thing was about, a decoupling power from the United States. He understood that if we kept hitching our wagon to this star, well, that star is going to go down. And if we're not careful, it's going to blow up. So when he leaves office, we have 50 trade agreements, right? So Stephen Harper set Canada up in really strong and powerful ways. And not to mention the childcare benefit, right? Not to mention the childcare benefit. What's the legacy of the Trudeau Liberals? Carbon tax? Banning straws? Like, for real? Like, I'm not asking this question rhetorically. Like, what can we look at and say that the Trudeau Liberals accomplished on the same scale as the Harper administration? Stephen Harper was a better prime minister than Justin Trudeau. It's embarrassing to say, but that's the truth. I'm glad somebody gives a crap about the disabled. Yeah, I mean, they're the canary in the coal mine, man. If we're not taking care of these people, we're not taking care of anybody. DJ, I'm doing all right, thanks. Hope you're doing well. I'm about to work on my video game project. Oh, amazing. Trying to make a video game. Maybe it will pull me out of ODSP and poverty. Haha, here's for hoping. I'm chill and listen for a bit. Shared your stream on Twitter. Oh, thanks, bud. I love that. Please share it around. We got to stick together and help each other out. And dude, are you in the Discord, DJ? Like, have you actually donated, and are you in the Discord, or are you just one of the regulars that comes in and we chat? Because if you're in the Discord, I think that there would be a lot of people who would be interested in maybe helping you out with a project like that. I mean, lots of people interested in helping maybe with some writing. I don't know about coding or anything. I know there's some graphic designers and stuff in there. Oh yes, legalizing weed, right? Like legalizing the thing that should have never been illegalized in the first place. Allowing their corporate buddies to seize control of the weed creation, right? Sure. Like Stephen Harper eliminated child poverty. Not eliminated, but like decreased child poverty. Like, and that's just objectively true. And it's always been confusing to me that he himself has never touted this. And I ultimately think it's because he knows his base would find it to be quite unpopular. And also he knows that his enemies would use it to argue for further social welfare programs. Oh, you can pass a basic income for children? Why can't you pass a basic income for the disabled? Why can't you pass a basic income for the populace? Right? And he knows that you could. Of course he knows, right? Like, Stephen Harper is a very intelligent man. He absolutely knows that you could pass a basic income and that would be affordable and that it would work, right? But he also knows that the consequences of it would be that you'd have to stop wage slavery, right? You just have to. You could no longer get away with enslaving the populace with wage peonage, right? And he's aware of that. It's just $1, DJ. It's just $1. Right? And then I'll give you the Discord link and we'll get you on in. And I love video game I'd love to talk to you more about what your idea is about that kind of thing. I've been elbows deep in a video game called Graveyard Keeper. It's very similar to Stardew Valley. And of course it really hits me in that I used to be in funeral services, right? And so it really hits me in this kind of, not nostalgia, but just like, you know, I do have sort of fond recollections and fond memories of this. And in many ways, it's like tending for like tending a little bonsai garden, right? You just doing it to kind of like find like a peaceful meditation and steadily building up like a little graveyard. It's great fun. I'm really revealing myself to be a nerd. My subscriber count is just going to drop. Everyone's going to be like, who's this fucking loser? Why am I listening to this guy playing video games like a loser? Oh yeah, that one's fun. I really like it. A bit grindy, absolutely. But that's part of it, right? That's part of it. And it really, what I always try to take lessons from video games. People pretend like video games aren't art, that they are merely distraction. I think that's bullshit. And the real lesson that I am taking from Graveyard Keeper is like, if you've got a project, if you've got something in front of you and it's big and it's large and it's daunting, don't worry about it, right? Break it up into its small components and just start picking away at it. And even if you don't have a great plan, and even if you make mistakes, and even if things are all this kind of stuff, you can, the simple act of actually just doing it. Just start doing stuff. Just start doing it. And you'll find that the just doing it is how things improve, right? I think about that in terms of my decoration of my apartment. I've moved into this apartment, and of course it's COVID, and so I can't do anything. But like, I want to get a Canadian flag, and I want to get a communist symbol, and in the shot, and over here I want some motivational stuff. And it's just steadily, picking away at it and making it happen. It's like an old Confucius quote that I love to use, which is, "A man moves a mountain by carrying away small stones." And so a game like Graveyard Keeper really reinforces this, that when I finish a session of this game, it really does remind me that, like, oh, this project I have over here, and even simple things like cleaning your room, right? Like doing the laundry. Like, it's all about just the small achievements. And then suddenly you'll find that this enormous project is completed, and you'll be like, oh, wow, how did that happen? And maybe it wouldn't even take you as long as you thought it did, but maybe it took even longer, right? Maybe it took even longer, but that doesn't matter. Ruth, video games sharpen the mind, absolutely. And this is the confusing thing. Like, I play chess, and no one I've ever met would ever denigrate anybody for playing the game chess, right? That chess is a game that we all accept as being like an excellent activity. It should be considered like a high-level achievement to do well in chess, and everybody acknowledges that. But if you take a game like chess and then you make it happen in real time, and you create multitasking, then suddenly it's less good, right? Like, somehow the game of chess, if it's faster, and instead of it being just like these medieval kind of ancient pieces, they are, I don't know, robots or something, right? Suddenly it's for children. Like that, it's very confusing. It's very confusing. DJ, I want to make my video game about social change. To create a social game where people can go to galleries and learn about different social systems in a way to teach people in a fun way. Interesting. I like it. Puzzles and things to get people to work together, to pick up a book and solve something, learn various languages. I don't want to stand repeated with it, though. I know how it is. When you have an idea, and you just want to get it out, Yeah, I like that concept of moving stones to move a mountain. Chess is good. Yeah. Have people like go around and try to find like, set it in like a post-apocalyptic future where you've got to go and find like Mao's Little Red Book and copies of the Communist Manifesto, and like you're finding like a page at a time, and when you find the page, it's actually there and you can actually like read it, right? And then steadily over time they like are building this book of the Communist Manifesto that is that has been destroyed because of the nuclear powers of the capitalists, all this kind of stuff. And so you're trying to rebuild the knowledge of the communists so that you could form a revolution against the capitalist bourgeoisie. That's just spitballing, though. That's just spitballing. I was just watching. Joe Rogan torches the Olympics. Spend that shit on infrastructure. He's just saying exactly what I've been saying about the Olympics. The athletes aren't paid. The Olympics come into areas, and when they leave, they destroy the area economically, and it just services to enrich the billionaire class, while destroying not only the athletes but the cities that they actually set the Olympics in, right? And all of that money would be better off spending it on infrastructure. Spend that shit on infrastructure. We live in an insane world. Unions must stand united to end Canada's arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, the idea that we are pretending as though we are aghast at the Uyghur genocide when we are selling arms to a nation that is enacting a genocide is childish. We are a nation of children. Oh, here's something very scary. Italian far right take to the streets singing, "Where are the anti-fascists hiding?" Here's something that legit happened. What's scary about this? Like, when the fascists take to the streets here in Canada, you see that there aren't that many of them, right? The tiki torch mobs and all this, you really come to see how weak they are. This does not look weak. This looks like a lot of people, right? This is a lot of people walking through the streets in Italy. Where are the anti-fascists hiding? Well, what do you think they're going to do to the anti-fascists, right? Very scary given the rise of Mussolini that occurred. Very scary given the rise of right-wing fascism that we have seen across the world. So, Italy, worth looking at. Oh, and I think I'm actually catching up with what I had prepared. So now we are at the whims of fate. The whims of fate. So this comes from Jen Zedong, right? And as always, Jen Zedong always requires a lot of unpacking. They're saying the Democratic People's Republic of Korea began as and remains a democracy. South Korea began as a colony and a military dictatorship and now has an imperialist capitalist dictatorship. The search for purity in leftist discourse and struggle ultimately pollutes both. So, in my estimation, this is like somewhat true. I'd say this is like kind of true. And the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, it is like the number one thing that people do not talk about when it comes to talking about North Korea, right? So let's opening Google Maps. We're gonna open Google Maps, opening Google, opening Google. So the number one thing that people do not talk about in regards to the relationship between North Korea, South Korea, and North Korea and the rest of the world is that the Americans absolutely decimated North Korea throughout the 60s. That the Korean War was a disaster for North Korea. That it was leveled to the ground. The fact that they have achieved what they have achieved now is a modern day miracle. And when Vice did the big documentary where they went in and they acted like, wow, man, this place is so weird, and look at all the weird stuff. They completely omitted from the conversation the fact that North Korea was completely leveled. So yeah, of course it looks a little odd. Of course there's strange. Like, he was walking into schools, and this is like in 2000, he was like walking into schools and being like, they still have televisions from the 1980s. Huh, what a backwards people. And you're like, dude, these guys literally got bombed to rubble. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it's because propagandists use omission very effectively. That is the most effective way to be a propagandist, is to just omit key aspects of the truth. and pretend as though you're showing the larger picture. Well, maybe you could help me with some feedback and ideas and help people learn about communism. Yeah, I'm down. Talk about it more in your Discord when I join. Perfect, bud. Perfect. Well, glad to have you. Glad to have you. The only time I know of where the Olympics did something good was in the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin, where Hitler had to put the persecution of Jews on hold for 2 weeks. Oh, there you go. Right? Always a silver lining somewhere, Macht. Always looking for the silver lining. God bless you. Yeah. Oh man, I'm toying with the idea that when I hit 1,000 subscribers of doing a 24-hour live stream. I've been thinking about that I could do like a 24-hour live stream and we could do like a big donation, create like a charity pool to like donate to charity and all of this. I think that would be a really lovely way to celebrate, 1,000 subscribers. But it does mean that I should probably have some material prepared to like show, because like I'm basically talking for 3 hours straight, right? And sometimes I end it and it's like I feel great and everything's fine, but sometimes I end it and I feel pretty tired. Today's going to be one of those days where I feel pretty tired. So I've got to come up with a strategy for this, but that's something that I'm trying to get into the consciousness of the chat and get into the consciousness of the Discord, that I am willing to do a 24-hour live stream for charity purposes, especially in celebration of hitting 1,000 subscribers. So find some people, get some subscribers. Let's go. Let's do it. These are the last days of American imperialism. We are so lucky to be alive now, as bad as it seems. So many great revolutionaries of the past would kill to trade places with us. Remember that. I mean, it's yet to be seen if these are in fact the last days of American imperialism, right? Like, America has the largest military in terms of funding and technology in the world. And even if it didn't, even if it got eked out by, let's say, somebody like China or something, there's still a massive, massive military threat. They have the most well-funded police forces. They have the most well-funded military forces. They are funding a space force. They are, even if the American empire is forced to recede from the Middle East, even if there is an economic collapse, they still have access to all of this incredible weaponry and incredible power. And it's very unlikely that outside of some kind of legitimate, sustained revolutionary protest movement, it's very, very unlikely that the American empire is going to go away. Like, it's very unlikely. And it could turn in the other direction. Like, it could go the other direction. Like, we could just outright be faced up with a tyrannical military dictatorship that just decides that, like, this democracy thing, that was fun, but, we have the nukes, you don't. We've got tanks, you don't. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? Like, that's what could happen in the United States, for sure. The imperialists may put a man on the moon, but they'll never put a man in Havana. I love it. I love this. That is a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. I really see, this is why I subscribe to Gens of the Dawn. Because sometimes they come out with really great articles, and sometimes they come out with just like really lovely, clean statements like this. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Just a picture of Pedro Castillo, a comrade and future president of Peru. Yeah, really, really good news here coming out of Peru. And I've done a little bit more research. I listened to a interview that Nicolas Maduro gave to Bloomberg. And it was a very good interview. A bit difficult because you had to watch the whole thing. I couldn't just listen to it because it was all subtitled, right? But I came out of that seeing that what I've been talking about here in South America, where there are an attempt to create federated bodies of leftists is in the works, and that Nicolas Maduro and the leadership, I forget his name all of a sudden, Morales? Is it Morales in Bolivia? Anyway, that they are working together to try and create like a federated body and something like a leftist coming into power in Peru. That in Chile, the leadership that is polling at the highest is actually the communists, right? So you're starting to see more leftists take over. If Brazil goes left and Lulu takes over again, you could see like a legitimate push for a leftist federation in South America, which would be incredible. It'd be incredible to see. The Americans, of course, will do everything they can to stop this, to blow it apart as best they can. But it's amazing to see the people of South America. It's amazing to see their resilience. It's amazing to see their passion. And hopefully, we will come to a place as a people where we can maybe, I don't know, stop bombing them, stop embargoing them, stop fucking with them. Just let them be who they are and let them develop peacefully and, you know, trade with them and treat them as neighbors and friends. Like, what we're doing now is not working, and it's going to continue not working. Oh yeah, I like this one too. Socialist countries, American liberals, free speech, fascism. Yep, this is essentially how it's working. That fascism is coming into the discourse on the Trojan horse of free speech, when we should never tolerate in our discourse fascists. And it's not fascism is not free speech, right? Fascism is incitement of violence. That's what fascism is. That's not protected speech. If you're willing to stand up and say that Jews or black people or Hispanics or any of these should be rounded up or should be treated differently, if you're willing to use racial slurs against them, if you're willing to denigrate them, if you're willing to put them in any position other than the position of equal with you, then you should not be part of the discourse. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. It's not free speech. Healthy food being more money than junk food never seemed all right to me. It seems like healthcare profits off desperate people in poverty who are forced to eat fattier foods and therefore develop health problems. Yeah. Great, now do a price comparison. Yeah, exactly. Like, people are, it's expensive to eat healthy. It's expensive to eat healthy. Oh yeah, I cannot believe that Dr. Pepper did this. This is total fucking bullshit. Dr. Pepper tweets, "If you can relate to this, you deserve a Dr. Pepper. My parents in their 30s. This would make a lovely second home for our family in winter, and hopefully the garage can fit both our cars, snowmobile, and ski equipment. Me in my 30s. I deserve this, Dr. Pepper." Go fuck yourself, Dr. Pepper. Like, go fuck yourself to the ground, man. Like, this meme is explicitly, even the meme that they've released is showing that, like, the purpose of this meme is to show that when our parents were in their 30s, they were able to get houses, and that now that we're in our 30s, we realize we've been fleeced, right? And so for Dr. Pepper to come and this is like the commodification. It's like what I was saying yesterday with that Pepsi ad, that idiotic Pepsi ad where Kylie Jenner gives a cop a Pepsi and then everything's like happy and wonderful. Like, this is just fucking completely out of touch and rife with contempt. Like, these people have contempt for us. They look at us as nothing more than commodities. They do not believe that we are human. They do not believe that we are equals. They do not see our humanity at all. They see us strictly as bags of money to try and pilfer as much wealth out of as they can. That is it. That we are cogs in their machines and bags of money for them to steal. And nothing else. And the fact that they're willing to do this kind of stuff to infect and infuse and co-opt the meme culture in an attempt to twist it to convince people to buy Dr. Pepper. Gross. Gross. Labrador man was illegally detained by police following provocative tweets. Good. Oh, illegally detained. Let's see what these tweets had to say. Are they actually going to show me the tweets? Are they actually going to show me the tweets? Show me the tweets. Show me the tweets. You're not going to... Oh, here we go. This is one of them. When will Premier of Newfoundland be arrested for state-sponsored terrorism? How about this? I'm going to bring down Confederation and have politicians executed. Ready to have me shot, coward? Oh. See, this is the fine line. This is the fine line that we have to walk, right? That I understand the spirit and the desire, the anger towards the political class. I understand the anger, but we can't outright call for their death. We can't outright say we should round these guys up and kill them. What we should be saying, and anybody who hears this should understand that what we should be saying of them is we should arrest these fellows and put them on trial. And if the result of the trial is that they should be killed as traitors are killed, then so be it. That's how you say these things. That's where you funnel your energy, right? You don't simply say, we should shoot this guy, right? Because that's something that police forces should be taking seriously, right? Like, if a guy is tweeting out in public, I lost it. If a guy is tweeting out in public, how about this, Premier of Newfoundland, I'm going to bring down Confederation and have politicians executed, ready to have me shot, coward? I mean, given what happened January 6th at the United States Capitol, I think it's completely acceptable for police services to at least investigate, at least look at this guy and be like, how serious is this? Is this guy just talking shit? Or, but like, and it just flows into like, so if you let this guy talk shit, well, then somebody else is going to start talking shit. And if somebody else starts talking shit, and then what if they find each other? And now they're organizing. And now you have another insurrection on your hands, right? And this ties in exactly what I've been saying about fascism, right? You don't just get to openly call for people's executions. You don't just get to openly call for rounding up people, right? I do definitely think, like this tweet here is fine as far as I'm concerned. When will the Premier of Newfoundland be arrested for state-sponsored terrorism? Well, if he's guilty of state-sponsored terrorism, we should actually think about this. Calling for the arrest of people is completely fine. We should be calling for the arrest. I call for the arrest of all of these oil executives. I legitimately do not believe that we are... I will not believe, and I will never concede this ground. This is a hill that I will die on. That until we have incarcerated, I don't mean we've arrested, I don't mean we've put on trial, I mean until these people, ExxonMobil executives and CEOs and shareholders from the 1970s to the modern era, to today, to the present, until these people have been put on trial and are in jail, only then will I say we have begun to take climate change seriously. And until we do that, I will never, ever, ever believe that any politician, not even a single politician, gives one shit about climate change at all. And that our only recourse as a society is to take to the streets and take over major infrastructure and occupy them until these people are incarcerated. So him saying these people should be arrested, okay. It's this other tweet though. How about this, Premier Bell? I'm going to bring down Confederation and have politicians executed. Ready to have me shot, coward? On the line. On the line. And there are lines. There are lines, right? Like, when we're talking about Israel, for example, we have to be very clear that we are talking about Zionism. We're not talking about Judaism. We're not talking about even Israelis. We are talking about Zionists, right? Much in the same way that when you're talking about Nazis, you're not talking about Germany, right? So there are lines, they do exist, and the question is, did this guy cross a line, right? Did this guy cross a line? And I mean, at the end of the day, I am glad that he looks like he has been released. It looks like the 2008 Supreme Court ruling found in the Western Healthcare Corporation had not produced evidence to show the detention was lawful, right? So they're coming out and saying that that this guy was detained illegally, and it looks like it happened. And so his detention happens April 7th, 2015, right? And as a person like myself who is in the position that I'm in, right, where I am saying things that seem similar to this, right? I am calling for the arrest of powerful people. I am calling for the arrest of politicians. I am calling for the arrest and inquiry into especially climate change related crimes, right? Does this mean the police can roll in and arrest me? Am I to be detained because I think we should be arresting oil executives and politicians for their crimes against humanity, right? So I'm actually quite happy to see that this guy. So an apology issued on behalf of the RNC. Who anyway. Anyway, because this is a very slender issue, right? Like there are lines, and we have to draw those lines, and we have to know where those lines are, and we have to decide whether or not people have actually crossed those lines. I don't think this guy crossed the line, right? He wasn't even really calling, like, those were probably the worst tweets that they could show. He wasn't calling. One assumes that, like, so the tweets that they showed, when will the Premier of Newfoundland be arrested for state-sponsored terrorism? What's the problem with arresting politicians that are engaging in state-sponsored terrorism? How about I'm going to bring down Confederation and have politicians executed? I mean, that's a pretty aggressive statement. That's a pretty aggressive statement, but sounds to me like he's doing so within the confines of the legal system. There is a way to execute traitors, right? That exists in the law, in the legal system. We just don't do it very often. And this is him saying, ready to have me shot. He's accusing them of being these people, and of course now they've detained him for it. So in a way that justifies his behavior, right? It's self-justifying. That, like, here is somebody who is calling for the arrest of the Premier of Newfoundland, right? Saying that he is going to bring down the Confederation and have politicians executed, right? And then what does the state do? They go and arrest him, completely justifying his positions. I mean, does the man have a mental illness? Does he have maybe? So what? And they're calling him a loser. Yeah. So this is a very concerning story for someone like me, right? Can the police come and knock on my door? Can they just arrest me for the things that I've said? Do you think so? Canada, ground your plans for 88 new fighter jets. From rock stars to scholars, 100 public figures tell the Trudeau government to spend $77 billion some other way. Yeah, a basic income. Here's your talking point from now until forever, by the way, if you're a fan of the basic income. So they're saying that the basic income will cost $100 billion. That's the price tag that they're coming out with. And of course, it's less than that, but 100 billion is a nice round number. People can really glom onto it. Well, these fighter jets are 77 billion, and we don't need these fighter jets. What do we need these fucking fighter jets for? For what? Give me one good solid reason why we need 88 new fighter jets, right? Just so we can bomb some defenseless brown people overseas? No thanks. Not interested. Seems boring. Seems like something we shouldn't be doing, right? Spend that 77 billion some other way. A 19-year-old woman in Utah was charged with hate crimes for allegedly stomping on a pro-police Back the Blue sign, facing a year in prison. Police are using updated hate crime laws that now protect law enforcement, claiming she looked at officers in an intimidating manner. Like, imagine how huge a coward you have to be, right? To see someone stomping on a sign and looking at you in intimidating ways, and then arrest her, especially a 19-year-old, like a teenager, right? And then charging her and putting her in prison for a year. So you're putting her in prison for a year for stepping on a sign and staring at you in intimidating ways. Like, talk about actions that like self-justifying actions, right? You are fucking Nazis. Like, that's shit that Nazis do, right? You don't live in a free country. You don't live in any of that kind of stuff. Like maybe they could peg her with like destruction of property or something, right? Like maybe they could peg, fine her, right? Do you need more evidence that your society is in a severe state of decline? Do you need more evidence that that authoritarian forces have taken over your society than hearing that a 19-year-old woman in Utah stomped on a Back the Blue sign while looking scary at police officers? This warrants a year in prison. Staggering. Meanwhile, Bill Cosby literally raped 60 women. He's walking around, totally free, no problems whatsoever. Oh, okay. We should definitely tolerate that. Proud Boys neo-fascist hate group joins Cuba protest outside Versailles on Kale Oko last night. Hey. Scary shit. Civil society calls for reinstatement of social relief on distress grant and unconditional basic income grant. More and more people, and more United States cities. Basic income mayors, United States. The mayors piloting, so more and more mayors across, do they actually have the map? There is a map that exists. More and more mayors across the United States are actually joining in and launching their own independent basic income program. That this is becoming a larger and larger initiative. Here you go. This is becoming a larger and larger initiative throughout the United States. That you can see, and they've got it all here. because mayors of these places are beginning to understand that they are abandoned, like they've been abandoned, if not by their governors, then certainly by the federal government, and so they're having to do things on their own, right? So you're seeing across the United States more and more people beginning to see like one of the major solutions, because the major problem that we're faced here in North America isn't that we don't have resources, it's that the distribution of those resources is unequal and is not working on behalf of the majority of the citizenry. And something like a basic income helps to redistribute those resources more equitably. Is it the final answer? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But as the collapsing society continues, as the economy continues to, and as we fall further and further behind other nations, they're going to pass a basic income simply because they're out of ideas, right? Simply because they will not know what else to do, and they'll eventually eventually a lot of these cities are going to already have these projects in place. They're already going to be moving forward with these ideas, and they're like, you look how much information we're going to have. Like, look how much information in even 4 years. Look how much information we're going to have, and it's just going to become more and more obvious, and it's just going to become more and more embarrassing to listen to the people who are against these ideas. So we'll see how it all goes, but I actually do have high hopes for this, because it's the mayors of the cities themselves. They're not sitting around waiting. They're doing it themselves, and they know that they can do it themselves because it's cheaper for them to do it this way, right? That's the big turning point for a lot of American mayors, is that they know that it's cheaper to deal with the issues of poverty than it is to deal with the consequences of poverty, right? That if you give people the money that you would spend dealing with the consequences of poverty, you get more positive outcomes, and then you also get to save a little bit of that money. So it's a real no-brainer for a lot of these mayors. Like, would you rather spend $1 million ensuring everybody had food and shelter, or would you rather spend $2 million keeping people hungry in the streets? Really, really straightforward answer to this. Like, really, really straightforward answer to this. And so lots of mayors, like, I mean, you got the mayor of Denver, right? And they have like a whole statement and his whole thing, right? So in my view, it's only a matter of time. We'll see. We'll see how the sociopaths try to mess with it. Yeah, and right in that line, U.S. suffers sharpest rise in poverty rate in more than 50 years. The end of 2020 brought the sharpest rise in U.S. poverty since the 1960s, according to a study released Monday. Meanwhile, China's Xi declares victory in ending extreme poverty. Eradicating rural poverty has been a key initiative of Xi Jinping's 8-year tenure. And it's just going to get more obvious. So I'm going to pause for just 1 minute, guys. Got to get some water. Going to go use the washroom. Be right back.
All right.
Hey, Onward, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Hello, this is Juan Cuban. My country, not enough freedom. Please invade. Please sell exclusive right to mine nickel to American corporation. Yeah, that's essentially what's happening. At the top of the show, I went through that, how it's really obvious that there's bot farms. It's really obvious that, like, what's happening is it's obviously a color revolution. Like, it's obviously a color revolution that they want to turn Cuba into Haiti. They don't like that there's a successful communist project happening here, right? They want this to be destroyed, very clearly, and they want the sugar and the rum, and they'll enslave the Cubans to get it. It's pretty straightforward stuff. And of course, I saw this picture, which I really love. The imperialists may put a man on the moon, but they'll never put a man in Havana. I really like that. I kind of want to frame it. I rather like it. Oh, we got a missing cat. If you're in Toronto, we got a missing cat. You see this cat around? Oh, yeah. That cat's gone, man. Yeah, if the Proud Boys are involved, we know the feds are involved. Absolutely, Onward. Absolutely, bud. Canada's pile of household savings is mostly held by the rich and won't be spent. This is from Better Dwelling, no less. Like, it's so funny how in this era of corporate newscasting, like, where we've lost faith in traditional media sources because they've just been overwhelmed by corporate power. Places like Better Dwelling are the ones that are coming out and, like, spitting fire, right? Canadians have an epic pile of savings accumulating, but it's not as big as most economists think. Oxford economist Tony Stillo took a deep dive into the household savings rate this week. The firm found the gross numbers exaggerate the total that can be actually used. Further, wealthier households represent more than half the savings accumulation. In the end, only 13% of the epic pile is forecast to actually be used. Ugh. Canadian household accumulated 184 billion. This is actually like a paltry number in and of itself when you consider that the Canadian economy is like $9 trillion. Only 100 billion of those savings are liquid. Wealthier households represent most of the savings. Yeah. Like, and they're not going to spend that money. Like, that's not real. As a result, they see only a tiny sliver of household savings entering the general economy by the end of 2022. They forecast just 24 billion of the 184 billion in gross savings will be used. This works out to 13% of the pile everyone thought was going to lead to the revenge spending spree. Yeah. Like, I have never dissected the Canadian pension plan. I've kind of left that alone. I don't know enough about it, Ward. Good to see you, Ward. Glad you're here. I mean, it does seem a little capitalisty, if that's a word. South African food riots show the need for a basic income grant. Yeah, I mean, you just should never, like, wow. As rioters target supermarkets, activists call on the government to help those who cannot survive amid rising prices and mass unemployment. The government must immediately institute a basic income grant as an emergency measure if it wants to stop food riots from taking hold permanently, say activists. With the expanded unemployment rate at 43%, its highest level ever, it would be foolish to label everyone who participated in the Free Zuma protests and took food from major supermarkets as irrational and criminal. These protests are driven by economic issues, not so much the political issues of freeing Jacob Zuma. Yeah. Like, devastating levels of hunger. The group also predicted last month that high food prices and low level of jobs could lead to social disorder. Capitalism's the best at distributing resources, guys, didn't you know? It's the best at it, right? You just got to sell yourself into wage slavery, and then you can have access to the bare meager. Come on, these guys are just lazy, right? Half the population is unemployed. They're just lazy, right? There are jobs everywhere. Just go get a job. Jeez. It's a public mutual fund. All right. Cool. Like, socialist activist Alfred Moyo says the latest lockdown pushed impoverished people past their limits. Millions of poor communities cannot afford to be pushed back into further lockdowns, which are imposed by those above without consideration of realities on the ground. We cannot eat any further lockdowns. People are hungry now. People are angry now. And my view of this is something like a basic income is just rational. It's just rational that if we were a rational people, we would think, well, of course we should have some kind of a permanent system in place that stabilizes people's access to food and shelter. Like, of course we should have that. That's perfectly rational. It's perfectly rational that a society should want itself to be stable in regards to food distribution and housing. Like, why is it not assumed that we want stable systems in place? That the stabilization of this is something that's happening in the world stage. That American capitalists went over to China and enriched China because China was willing to sell cheap labor, right? Which it's still willing to do. But this enrichment of China is now turning into a major national security issue for the United States, who doesn't want there to be a peer competitor in the world. But the capitalists can't stop trading with China. And they won't stop trading with China. And they won't for one very clear and simple reason. China is stable. The United States is not. And it doesn't matter that the capitalists are the ones that are largely responsible for destabilizing the United States, but that no longer matters. What does matter is that China is stable, right? It's steadily growing. It's predictable, right? That's something that people really, that investors really like about China, and like they can stand up and be like, oh, I wish their markets were freer, and I wish that I could exploit people more easily, and all that kind of stuff. They can say that kind of stuff as much as they like. But the truth is that China is stable and the United States is not. And much in the same way, like if you want to stabilize your economy and you want people to be stable, well, they need to have stable and consistent access to food and shelter. How do you do that? Well, a basic income. A basic income gets it done. There was not ever a contemplation of a fourth step. I don't really understand what I'm looking here, but I feel like the quote out of context makes it seem like we're going to be in step 3 forever. Oh yeah, okay, never mind. This is just bullshit. I don't need to care about that. This is literally just like Doug Ford nonsense, and like trying to sift through Doug Ford nonsense is just like, it's like cringy. It takes forever, and then in the end you land on the same point that you always land on. Oh, a former drug dealer who beats his wife who is a sociopath is a former drug dealer who beats his wife and is a sociopath, and we should expect him to act that way. Well, the vote was 17-7. I'm surprised actually that it was that firm. I was expecting it to be closer. Toronto will rename Dundas Street and other Dundas named things. Knowing the politicians, they'll name it something stupid. It'll be like Freedom Lane, like Canada Street. I mean, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is much worse than it seems. Oh, this is only 4 minutes? You know what? My voice could use a bit of a rest. Let's take a 4-minute
The
rest.
US embargo on Cuba is much worse than what it may seem like at first glance. And I'm going to tell you why. A lot of people tend to reply to talk of the embargo with stuff like, well, okay, but the embargo only impedes trade with the US, and there's also exemptions for medicine and for food, so it's not that bad, but it's actually not nearly that simple. First, the US is Cuba's natural geographical trading partner. It's a massive economy that's right next to Cuba's tiny little island. So Cuba is by default put at a massive disadvantage compared to its neighbors. But that's not why I'm making this video, don't worry, there's much more to this. The US enforces its embargo extraterritorially, meaning outside of its own territory, much more than you might think. How? Well, first, the US is the world's financial center. In order to safely trade with Cuba, a company needs to have literally no assets whatsoever in the USA itself, because otherwise they would be at risk of freezing or seizure for breaking the embargo. Now, let's say that you're a big company and you've got to choose between access to the US or to Cuba. Would you choose the USA, the world's biggest economy and its financial hub, or would you choose Cuba, a tiny little island nation of 11 million people? Obviously you're going to choose the USA, and that's part of the embargo's design. It's crafted and maintained with this in mind. But wait, there's more. Any cargo ship or plane that stops in Cuba cannot go to the USA for 6 months. Since both countries are right next to each other with only 90 miles separating them, most shipping companies obviously choose the US over Cuba, so it's much harder for Cuba to even secure transport for its trade. But hey, let's say that there's companies who do literally no business with the US at all. Literally none. They have no operations there, no assets there whatsoever. None at all. Well, the US still targets them. To try and disincentivize trade with Cuba as much as possible, their executives are banned from entering the USA, and any assets that they have there are seized. If you're a businessman, not being able to enter the world's global financial and business hub is obviously a pretty big deal. You might also ask, well, why don't these companies just make subsidiaries to trade with Cuba then? Well, the embargo actually specifically targets subsidiaries, punishing their parent companies if they trade with Cuba. So that's just not possible. And what about those food and medical exemptions? Well, in practice, they barely even actually exist. They're intentionally designed to be as unclear as possible in order to create legal uncertainty. And since businesses are naturally risk averse, most of them simply choose not to deal with Cuba at all, rather than jumping through all of those legal hoops and trying to avoid all of those little caveats that the embargo has in it. And those that try anyway can still have their shipments vetoed for whatever reason the authorities decide. So in practice, shipping food or medicine from the US to Cuba is so prohibitively difficult that most companies don't even bother to try. And that's 100% intended, and it always has been. The point of the supposed food and medical exemption is not legitimate humanitarian concern, it's rather a PR exercise of the US government. It's there so that they can say, well, on paper, there are exemptions for food and medicine, so clearly we're on the side of the Cuban people. So you can clearly see that the embargo covers much more than just what it might seem at first glance. It is designed to specifically leverage the USA's dominant global economic position to discourage as much trade around the world with Cuba as possible, and to punish anyone who dares to even try. The point of the Cuban embargo is simply to make the Cuban people suffer, and as long as the US government maintains it, it has no claim to caring about them at all, because it's simply obvious that it does not. The US embargo...
Man, this guy just laid it out, eh? That's a really good video. That's a really good video. Ward, you've piqued my interest, and Onward, if you're still here, I'll be seeing you too. That's adorable, little owl. You sweetheart. Okay, let's take a look. Canadian Pension Plan. What do they hold? Who is eligible? Understanding. You've got me intrigued, bud. You've got me intrigued. I'm hoping there's something I can just quickly see. Oh yeah, dude, this is going to be a big research project. I'm not going to do this on the stream. If there's a source or something that you could put in the Discord, I know you're part of the Discord, Ward. I'd gladly look at it. Amazon has moved beyond satire. Amazon has allowed me to live a comfortable life. A message from Amazon. Yeah. Very, very. Suspect sought after people set on fire inside Ossington subway station. Jesus. That's crazy, man. People are fucking crazy. Oh, I hope you guys are all doing really well out there. I hope everything's going well. I hope every single one of you is just living your best life. Oh, I think I was singing earlier, and I think I might have just given it a little bit too much, and so my voice is feeling a little tired today. Wait. Yeah, the UN, 40 million in U.S. live in poverty. Holy cow. Like 40 million? Like, what's the population of America? American population. So, a population of 328 million, right? 328 million, of which the UN is saying 40 million live in poverty. It's like 10%. It's like 10% of the society. And of course, they're made completely invisible. It's this invisibilization of the poor. This like completely eliminating them from the public consciousness totally. That we're not supposed to see them. We're not supposed to talk about them. That they are invisible. Like it's an enormous part of your society. There's no smoking gun. I mean, you would think that the bodies on the street are the smoking gun. You would think that the homeless. You would think that the abandoned disabled. You would think that the protests, the people gathering, the unemployment. You would think that that is all a smoking gun. But you just don't need to show the smoking gun. Render the smoking gun invisible. Oh, I love this guy, this Chen Wei Hao. Oh man, he's actually really on point. So Michael McFall says, some argue that the Chinese model is surpassing liberal democracy in popularity around the world. I don't see it. In the 21st century, has there been a single mass movement in the world demanding socialism or autocracy? Where have protesters mobilized to demand the China model? Chen, of course, responds, it's not really a popularity contest. Unlike the US, China is not exporting its model or ideology or touting it's the best in the world. The US should focus on fixing its own mess, from gun violence, racial disparity, to widening income gap and dysfunctional politics. And this is exactly, like, Chen is hitting on something that I think Westerners cannot fathom, right? That they don't really get. Like, in the United States has explicitly been exporting itself around the world for almost its entire time it's been alive, because fundamentally the United States is a white supremacist fascist nation, right? It believes that it's the best and everybody should be like it, right? That if you view the world as everything outside of the borders of the United States and everything non-white, if you view everything that's not you as inferior, right, then that means that you can supplant it with your superiority, and that is the correct thing to do. That one of the major arguments that colonial settlers will use is it is good that we are settling. We are bringing a superior civilization, that we can commit a genocide, that we can destroy the First Nations people, that we can destroy the Incans and the Aztecs, and the Mayans, that we can destroy all of these civilizations, because, well, they're just a barbaric, backwards culture in the first place, and they'll be so much better off with this new culture. Whereas China doesn't have this viewpoint, right? That it ostensibly sees some days have more interesting media discourse. Is it a Wednesday thing? I don't know, dude. I don't know. I think we're all just tied to the wheel of fate, and what occurs occurs. I couldn't tell you. Some days there's just more stuff, and some days there's less. It just seems to be the way. I just ride the wave. And China doesn't feel the need to export this model, and in fact, like China believes that its model is the superior model, obviously, but because if it wasn't the superior model, they wouldn't use it. But they don't feel this same need to inflict it on others. They don't feel this need to spread it into Russia or Kazakhstan. And this is why they say that they are doing Marxism with Chinese characteristics, because they're being very careful not to claim Marxism for themselves exclusively and to say to the world that this is the only way to do Marxism and Marxist ideas. They know that every culture and every society and every civilization, because China views itself as a civilization, not a nation, a civilization, that every culture and nation and society and civilization is going to encounter these ideas and is going to implement them in ways that make sense for them. They know that that's the case. And this idea of, which is quite inclusive, which is quite like advanced in regards to how civilization should operate, is completely foreign to the United States, which has made its entire ethos. Its entire ethos is based on getting in other people's business and causing problems. Like, the entire ethos of the United States is about going into other nations, destroying them and stealing their resources and spreading democracy. So Westerners can't really contemplate this idea that, like, it's not really a popularity contest, that China is going to do what's good for China, and it hopes that you do what's good for you, right? And that we can move forward with mutual cooperation. And really, the relationship between China and Russia is steadily becoming one that the rest of the world should really, really pay attention to and really be kind of in awe of, actually. That, like, China and Russia, instead of being antagonistic with one another, instead of going after one another, instead of puffing out their chests and pounding on it, are looking at one another and being like, yeah, we could be buddies. Let's bro down. Right? I love it. I love it. This is the U.S. crippling sanctions against Cuba, right? Yep. And those sanctions have created serious economic issues for Cuba. Yup. So if we lifted the sanctions against Cuba, that would solve a lot of their problems. Sounds right to me. So we can't blame problems created by U.S. sanctions on their revolutionary government. No, it's all because of commies and authoritarianism. This is how they sound. Like, it is. Oh, yeah. Gorbachev. Imperial International conveniently leaving out the cause of the shortages. Yeah. Amnesty International, the Diaz-Canel government must address the social demands of its citizens. Given the economic crisis, the shortages of food and medicine, the collapse of the health system, which is not responding to the current COVID-19 crisis. Like, I would like to hear the rationale for maintaining the embargo at this point. At this point, I would like to hear the rationale for actually, well, and it's not an economic theory, Ward. Like, this is the big thing, that people need to begin realizing, right? Like, I assume you're talking about neoliberal economics. Like, neoliberalism isn't an economic theory. It's a religious ideology that was couched to look like an economic theory. And this is the reason why we're in such disarray as a people, because the people who are benefiting from the religious ideology, like, our society is more closely linked to a theocracy than anything, right? Like, we literally have, like, bankers are priests, like, they're that money is faith, right? Like, we aren't actually investing in an idea of, like, we're not actually doing economics. Like, we don't actually know anything about economics as a people. Like, we don't really know what deficits are. We don't really know, like, what government debt is. We don't really know any of this kind of stuff, because for the last 50 years, we've been pretending that this religious ideology that we've been following is an economy. I mean, there are hard truths, right? Like, there are hard lines that are true and things that are false, right? Like, if you give all of your money to one person, your economy will collapse. That's true no matter what. That's true no matter what, right? Like, if everyone stops spending, your economy collapses. And that's fundamentally neoliberal economics. It's like, give all the money to the rich people. And the lie was that they would turn around and spend it. But the truth is that they have no reason to spend it. They're completely disincentivized to spend it. Why would they? Why would they spend that money? That's all the power of the nation, right? I would sit on it. Let me become a feudal king, for sure, right? Like, and the idea that they would turn around and spend that money from the goodness of their hearts. I mean, that's kind of how deluded the populace has been. Yeah, people keep talking about, this is coming out of the millennial snowflake, who I love. People keep talking about laziness, but productivity has doubled since 1980. Meanwhile, wages have only increased by half. So be lazy. Sit on your asses, put your feet up on your desk, and take a nap. If wages aren't going to match productivity, what's the fucking point? Yep. And this ties into, like, what you call, Ward, the mass resignation? The resignation... What did you call it? Did I not write it down? But, like, the mass resignation. People are just realizing, like, why work for this? Like, why are we working for this society? It's completely abandoning us. Why would we spend any amount of money, time, or effort putting any time into this? It's completely false. Minneapolis joins guaranteed income experiment using federal aid. Like, it's spreading. It's spreading. Biden's executive order on competition should be a wake-up call. This is Globe and Mail, so I might not be able to actually look at it. Yeah, to continue the article. Too bad. There is no neutral ground. We need unwavering militant support for the Cuban people and their government, a full defense of their achievements, improving the conditions of the people, directly taking resources out of the hands of our common enemy, the monopoly capitalists. Yep. Wow. Like, this is what I'm talking about, Jen Zedong. Like, why won't you dumb tankies pay any attention to Surinamese imperialism? I'm like, what? What are you even talking about? This is probably a historical event. Yeah, like French Ghana. Yeah. So, lots of, like, irony, self-mocking posts come out. And it takes me a moment because I'm kind of thick when it comes to them. Yeah, crocodile tears. Yeah, I believe in reconciliation. Reconciliation down the one side, election time across the other. Yeah, like it's hard to take this seriously while the liberal government like passes absolutely none of the suggestions made in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, right? It's all for show. They're not genuinely interested. Like, it's very difficult for me. One of the major things, like, people try to peg me as being like pro-China, and I'm like, I'm not necessarily pro-China, but I am pro-humanity. And like, it's very difficult for me to like, look at this. This is China, right? Like, it's a city. Like, our city is a city. Like, you don't build this with slave labor. Like, you don't build like a thriving society with like whips. Like, you just can't get there, right? That there's too much. That the underbelly of it will tear it apart. The speed of public education is altering the possibility of change. How do you mean, Ward? How do you mean? Like, do you think that public education, like, I have lots of opinions about our education system. Like, I think that our high school education is a waste of time. Like, I like, literally a complete and total waste of time. Like, we would be better off taking our kids and having them stare at clouds for 4 years, right? Like, genuinely, I believe that is how big a waste of time our high school system is. That we really, really would be better off, like, teaching kids how to meditate, teaching kids how to do yoga, like, teaching kids, like, honestly, I think that, like, get kids into the retail work environment, get kids into the food distribution network, educate them that way, show them what the world looks like, show them how this works, right? The danger of doing that, of course, is you'll teach them what capitalism looks like and then they'll revolt. So that'll never happen. China calls on U.S. to end economic blockade of Cuba after protests. Yeah, there really is no angle where you can justify these blockades. Like, this is what I want. I want to see the justification for the blockades. I want to see the legitimate argument. And I don't mean some, like, white supremacist on, like, a YouTube comment or something. Like, I mean, like, where is the legitimate argument for why this blockade exists? What is the purpose of the blockade? What is the legitimate argument? The truth is that there isn't one. Ukraine offers to be China's bridge to Europe amid warming ties. This is actually kind of funny because the bridge to Europe is actually Belarus. That there's already a line running from Moscow to Minsk, and then from Minsk to Warsaw. I believe it's Minsk to Warsaw. So, what is the Ukraine like? What is Ukraine talking about when it says it's going to be the bridge to Europe? Unless, of course, the plan is for the EU to dump Belarus and pick up Ukraine, and then get a line from Moscow to Kiev, and then Kiev up into Warsaw. Oh, you're hopeful we're all getting smarter. In the face of what evidence, Ward? What's your evidence for this claim that we're getting smarter? Don't get me wrong, humans are quite clever. We're quite resourceful, I find. We're able to make interesting tools and toys for ourselves, but I don't think we're a very smart people. Like, is white supremacy smart? Is it smart to do this? Is it smart to go over and invade this place and destroy it and steal its resources and create, like, literally we will be enemies of these people for 1,000 years. Like, we will be cursed and spit on and despised by the people of this region for 1,000 years. And perhaps after 1,000 years, of if we ever leave them alone, they may come to a point where they will learn to tolerate our presence. Like, is that a smart thing to do? Is that smart to alienate ourselves on the world stage, to create enemies like this, to show unstable and sporadic we are, as China is building inroads into Europe, is it smart to alienate Europe so that when push comes to shove, they'll go the way of China, so that we'll become isolated on the world stage and literally have to deal with this behemoth monster at our doorstep? Is all of that very smart? Seems to me like we are as short-sighted and petty and territorial as the apes we claim to have been improved upon. Like, when I take a look at like a silverback gorilla kind of pounding on his chest to keep other gorillas away from a patch of nuts, yeah, I don't see much difference between us and those gorillas, frankly. We just know how to build things. That's all. Get away, liberalism. You carrier of fascism. I also carry free speech. Ah, it's fascism. God damn it. That's a funny one, dude. That's a funny one. I like that. For people who hate and blame everything on the state, they certainly love acting like the CIA doesn't exist. Yeah, that's really funny, actually. Like, this is a really, really good point. That's a really, really, really good point. That, like, the same people in the United States who are saying that we need to be skeptical of the state, that the government doesn't do anything right, that the problem is government, and that we need to get rid of the government, that we need to, but the CIA is fine, and that the CIA isn't a government-run institution. Don't you think the young'uns are smarter? That's a really good question, Ward. That's a really interesting question. I'm going to sit on that one for a little bit, Ward. I'm going to sit on that one for a little bit. Because the issue that I have, like, of course I want to say that, like, well, we're certainly more educated. Like, the millennials and Gen Z are more educated. We have definitely pushed forward initiatives like human rights initiatives that have happened throughout the Western world. That we've definitely, like, there's been a technological upswell. There's been all of this. But my concern and my fear is that the same dumb shit that we've always done, in order to justify our abhorrent destruction of the world around us, will simply morph, right? That we will, that we'll just continue doing that kind of behavior, but instead of it being like against homosexuals, it'll be against poor people, right? That if you don't attain a certain level of class status, then you'll be denigrated and put upon. Because I think that the millennials and Gen Z are just as susceptible to propaganda. I think that propaganda is just as effective as it always has been. I think the difference is that now with the existence of the internet, that propaganda can be more effectively combated, and it can be combated in real time. And the people who are interested in combating that propaganda, whereas before they were isolated and they didn't really have a method of reaching out and communicating, that now they do, and we can see them. Like something like Jen Zedong is exactly the point that I'm talking about. That, like, here is a Reddit where people are coming to debunk imperialist propaganda. And it's obvious that's what they're doing. That's what they're interested in doing. And that's a tool that exists that didn't exist previously. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're much smarter, right? Like, I fear that even within the millennials and Gen Z, the sort of animal biases are ultimately going to exist, and we are easy to divide. Like, the division that exists between the boomers and Gen Z is one of these such divides, and absolutely the capitalists will use that to maintain their own power, right? Absolutely, if they can change the conversation into Gen Z needs to seek revenge against the boomers, right? As long as they ignore the capitalists, right? That they'll absolutely foment that, and it's easy to do that. And I take a look at, like, the Uyghur genocide is actually kind of a case in point, right? Like, the people in the West have bought that propaganda hook, line, and sinker, and that includes Gen Z, and that includes millennials, right? Polling data shows that 70% of Canadians think the Uyghur genocide happened, right? Like, they think that it's real, like, and why do they think it's real? Well, because the liars and the propagandists are shouting about it, like, and first of all, is that smart for us to do? Is it smart for us to engage in this idea of accusation that China is engaged in a Uyghur genocide? Well, what's going to happen if the UN goes in there and comes out saying, no, we didn't find a thing, right? Well, I guess egg on the face, right? But there's still going to be millions of people who think that that's the case, right? Is that smart? Is that smart for us to do? Like, I just feel like the stupidity is going to evolve. That it's like that classic adage, like, if you try to make something foolproof, they'll just make a better fool, right? Well, if you try to make a system smart or more effective, you'll just make a better idiot, right? And if the United States and Canada have proved anything, it's that we are very efficient at making brutal sociopathic morons, and we'll just change our language. We'll change the way we're talking. We'll do a little song and dance, a little semantic argument. It's the same strategies and the same tactics that we've been using for hundreds of years to maintain power in the West, and it'll work, because the reality is that Canadians and Westerners, people in the United States, are gullible, like, extremely gullible. We believe anything. We literally believe anything. Like, we believed for 1,000 years that a wizard was coming back at any moment, right? Like, we believed, we'll believe anything, right? We believe the weapons of mass destruction lie. We believe the Naira testimony. We'll believe anything. We'll believe anything, and that's not going to change, right? Like, and as people like myself, and as there's this rise of like a neo-McCarthyism, right, which is fundamentally just a rise against telling the truth, as it becomes more entrenched and more obvious that the United States is not interested in hearing the truth about its own actions, and people will just buy it, right? Like, when the neo-McCarthyism starts in serious ways, when people start to have their shit busted up by cops, when all of that shit starts to really ramp up and happen in serious ways, you're going to find that, like, your moderate liberals and your centrists, your people who you thought generally knew better, are going to be hard-nosed fascists. They're just going to be like, well, these people should have just obeyed the law. That kind of bullshit, right? Well, they must have done something wrong, right? Like, why would the police kick in their doors if they weren't doing something wrong? Well, clearly they must have been involved in some kind of suspicious behavior, right? Like, you're going to find, like, normal centrists, normal people you're walking out on the streets with. That's how they're going to talk, and that's how they're going to act. And how do I know that's the truth? Because that's always how it's gone. That's always how it's gone. And it doesn't matter if that's how it's gone in Nazi Germany. It doesn't matter if that's how it's gone while we were enacting the residential school system here in Canada. It doesn't matter if that's how you're doing it in the midst of the Red Scare during the McCarthy period in the United States. It is always the case that people who are normal, centrist, kind of not that politically connected sort of people suddenly become terrifying far-right fascists when it comes to these specific issues, right? And is that smart? Are we getting smarter? Are we suddenly going to stop doing that? I doubt it. I very much doubt it. That when a Red Scare goes across the United States, you're going to find that it's going to become the popular position, not a popular position. The popular position will be that it's perfectly acceptable to kick in these communist stores and wreck their lives. And that will be the popular position. That will be the centrist position. Because it's always been that way. And I don't see any sign of that stopping. Because we are not very smart. And we like to think that we are. So, on that happy, wonderful, beautiful note, Ward, I'm going to put an end to this one. You guys are all doing really wonderfully out there. I need to sleep more. Apparently, I had a really sleepy stream this time. So my apologies if this one wasn't as good a stream as it usually is. But you guys are doing really wonderfully out there. I love each and every one of you. You are divine beings walking around in divine energy. Good luck. We're gonna need it.